Hello, everyone. This is Caillou, and I'm joined today by Pipsqueak, Kevin, and Canterbury Egg, and we're here to review Elmare Into the Abyss. Now, y'all might be like, Egg? Wait, where's my usual dodger? Well, actually, what's happening here is Elmare is actually a set designed by Dodger, and so he decided to sit out this one, and Egg's coming on because the other set that got in during this review period, Dark Seas of Shiryen, was designed by Egg. So we're going to do a little bit of a designer trade-off right here. So with that, I think Kevin is going to start us off by talking about some of the lore and mechanics of Elmare. Take it away.
So Elmare, here, let me just pull up. Elmare Into the Abyss takes place on a plane that, according to its kingdom of merfolk denizens, is entirely underwater. Their underwater paradise is thrown into disarray, however, when a mysterious group of divers arrives from some unknown surface world and stirs the seafloor into disarray. But against the backdrop of the ensuing conflict, something is stirring deep within the depths of the Kuksuri Trench.
Cool. Yeah. So I think that Elmare definitely takes a lot of the under the sea vibes, but also has very specific um, art and lore direction that makes it feel like a distinct world, which I think is kind of like the very important thing in Magic, where you draw on tropes that people can relate to, and then solidify your setting with its unique elements. So I think Elmare succeeds a lot at that. So yeah, as for the mechanical side of it, Kevin, were you going to take that, or is it going to be Pip?
I think Pip had some interesting things to say about some of the mechanics, though. So I think we should let her go with it.
Okie
Sure. Okay.
dokie.
So Elmare is stuffed to the gills with mechanics. We have three new mechanics and 3.5 returning mechanics. So let's start with the new mechanics. So the first new mechanic we have is pressure. You can cast a spell for its pressure cost if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So how this kind of plays out is it's a threshold like. It has some vaguely delve elements. There's a couple of cards that use pressure as a kicker, but most don't. Um, and in MSEM, it has some interesting applications because of cards like Oracle's Vision, meaning that you can have pressure online by turn 3. Um, with that said, I think most of the pressure cards aren't. Dodger did a good job of costing them, so it's not like, oh, well, you definitely weren't meant to be able to cast this one on turn 3. Um, the next new mechanic is salvage. Creatures can salvage cards from your graveyard, and then when they hit a player, you recur the card they salvaged. Um, I would say that, I mean, in general, I'm not a big believer in, like, yes, this mechanic is designed for Construct or whatever. There's a couple of cards with salvage that play great in Constructed. I think most of the cards in it play better in Limited. And the last thing we have is Slipstream. Because this is a set entirely underwater, Dodger couldn't have flying. And because Dodger couldn't have flying, he needed to think of how he wanted to do evasive mechanics. So Slipstream is the new evasive mechanic. As long as only creatures with Slipstream are attacking, none of them can be blocked. Um, in practice, I don't think any of the Slipstream cards are good enough for Constructed. None of them are pushed that ridiculously, and also it's parasitic, i.e., if you only have Slipstream cards, it's better than flying. And if you have only like one Slipstream card and a couple other like flyers, the Slipstream card is basically useless. It's just a ground attacker. So it's possible it'll show up in some amounts, but I wouldn't be that high on it. Um, the other mechanics that it is returning is Concord, which is a pseudo made by Egg, and it's a as long as you control 4 or more different types of permanence effect. This GP Grand Prix Realm, we've already seen a ton of different Concord and Concord-like decks, although those haven't been on the back of Elmare cards. But still, the idea is here. It's also returning the Aura Shaper mechanic from Way by Time Spiraled, which are creatures that create auras when they enter the battlefield. Um, and then we're also returning Cycling and Treasure. Um, so, without further ado, I think we should just start getting into the cards.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Um, right over
All right, so
here.
Egg, why don't you start us off with this exciting reprint?
Yeah, sure. This is a reprint of Cast Out, which we've seen get played in some canon constructed formats. 4 mana enchantment, has flash. Basically, it's Oblivion Ring, but it also cycles for 1 white mana. So it's good in the sense that it's never dead. In matchups where your opponent has no permanents to exile, you can just draw a card for 1 mana. That's not a great rate, but for the fail case, it's pretty good. And then it has flash, so it can get anything at instant speed, which means you can hold it up and hold up a counterspell at the same time. You can use it to hit any permanent, any non-land permanent, so it can get the biggest thing on the battlefield at pretty much any point in the game. I'm in general not sold on Oblivion Ring effects that are more than 2 mana in MSEM, but I think that Cast Out has enough upside that there might be some, all flash decks or all enchantment decks or some Concord decks that would want to be able to hold up this to be versatile. So I think it has some applications, although I'm not convinced by it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think cycling 1 is what makes this card powerful, and it is good enough to occasionally see play in older formats. In Legacy, it recently saw play with the resurgence of Replenish in Shark Typhoon shells. So that would be one the place I would start looking for. If we have shells that allow us to, cheat out artifacts from our graveyard or that require artifacts in our graveyard to get going, I'd be more interested in Cast Out because enchantments, my bad. Because the fail case on it is either a cycler or this overcosted Oblivion Ring. But I don't want to run a fair Cast Out in any deck right now.
Yeah, 4 mana is just a little too expensive. But hey, you know what? It doesn't get hit by Pipwelt, so maybe
That's
big
true.
brain. But yeah,
True.
mm-hmm. Yeah, if we get
Let's
like
move
some,
on to
yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say one last thing. If we get like some sort of like 2 mana enchantment cheapener that's actually playable, I think then Cast Out becomes a lot more attractive. But yeah.
So let's talk about Conchhorn Shiny Grabber, which, in addition to having a really silly name, is a 2/2 with Slipstream. So I already gave my thoughts on Slipstream, but also this has whenever it attacks, you may pay 1 if you do create a treasure token. This can allow you to kind of filter mana or bank it slightly across turns. It also has a Wooburg activation to get +3/+3 and lifelink until a turn. I'm not sure where this card fits in. It's doing a lot of little things that are all neat, but the base case is also just a 2/2 for 2, and that's not super where I want to be in MSEM. What are your guys'
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think the fact that it's taxing you just makes that second ability just not relevant. Like the point where you're going to have the spare mana to pay for it, you probably won't be needing that treasure.
Yeah, like it's technically it's white ramp, but like it's just such an awkward because like if you ever want like if you want to curve out, then then like oh it sucks. Oh, you wanted to play a different attacker on 1 or 3. Well, bully for you because now it's just a 2/2 and you can't attack as safely. And I think that like the last ability is cute, but then if you're ever getting to the point where you can consistently activate it, then you've already won the game.
Yeah, I think if this worked more like the Duke, where it taxed your opponent, I would be so much higher on this. But as is,
It would also be
you
kind of
just
patently ridiculous probably at that point, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it might at some point have some relevance in decks that go fat on 2 drops, like a monument deck, because you're expecting to play a 2 drop on turn 3, which means you'd have the extra mana to create the treasure. But once you hit, 1 mana of every color, there's better things to do than turn your 2/2 into a 5/5. I do think it's worth pointing out that this is actually the turtle on the back of this creature. So don't be confused when looking at this art. The turtle is the shiny grabber.
So true. So true.
very
Don't want
cute.
people to fall into the Panya trap again.
I still don't get how people did that. Panya literally means mouse.
They just didn't do the translation.
Yeah.
That was their mistake.
Too bad
Pun.
we didn't know, what was it, Russian? We're not all fluent.
Oh, it's Swahili, actually.
Swahili. Okay, never mind. The
Yes, the famous Russian country of Kahambo.
Goddamn.
All right, let's talk about Coralite Champion, which is our next white 2-drop that seems vaguely playable. So Coralite Champion is a 2/2 for 2 that when it enters, you can put an aura on any creature. That aura gives both first strike and +1/+1 for each other creature you control. So the base case on this is it's a 2/2 first strike that grows with your other creatures. It's not hard to make this a Watch Wolf with first strike, where you just curve 1-drop into 2-drop. The fact that it can give the first strike and bonuses to the other creature is pretty nice, because that's kind of pseudo haste. I think in general, Dodger did push a lot of the Aura Shapers much more than Wei did. So I think it's going to require a little bit of reevaluation down the line, because I think a lot of people are still internalizing like, oh, well, this is how this one plays. So this is how Aura Shapers play. So this probably isn't a big deal. But I think this sort of effect is fairly powerful, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine this being kind of filthy with like especially stuff with like other keywords. If you have like a life linker, it's like, oh, okay, suddenly that bonus is worth so much more. And that's what I think, like that's
Yeah,
kind of the power of Aura Shapers, is like just the sheer flexibility, while also like, again, like white for what is effect like what is in most decks going to be like a 3/3 first strike is not a bad stat line for an aggro card. So
I
yeah,
would
like
say in most
that
decks
feels
it's
decently
probably
nice.
4/4. Like
yeah,
you get this out of bolt range so easily in any white X deck.
I
for
think
sure,
the
for
main
sure.
thing that you struggle with this card and this sort of archetype in general is there's a risk reward associated with going wide in MSEM. We have some really powerful sweepers, and I think just the constant fear that you need to have is if you go like a white 1-drop into white 2-drop into 2 white 1-drops and holding up an interaction spell or whatever. What do you do when your opponent goes cool, face the dawn, Ron, those sorts of things? Like, it's hard to be a creature deck, and especially a white creature deck, and catch back up once someone wipes your board. And that's why I think currently the best aggro decks in the format are Burn, where they have a lot of reach, and Counters, where they just kill you way faster than you can board wipe them. / they're immune to kind of like small ball wipes.
And also, like, I think a hidden thing with counters is that lots of their individual threats can also just grow themselves over time. Unlike other aggro
Yeah,
decks where it's like, like, like in white, like, okay, sure, you now have a 3/3, but I still you'll still usually have like 2 to 3 turns to just find an answer. While counters is like, in like 2 turns I can buff this up to big size.
Yeah, I think one thing that's always going to be important with 2-drops, especially in white, is that they get picked up by Monument, they get picked up by Theocracy, they get picked up by Toddy. So there's a lot of ways to mitigate the fact that, if you go 3 creatures into 1 board wipe, you lose out on card advantage, because you can pick it up in other ways. Um, I think this is pretty powerful. I think that the Aura Shaper deck has so many little knobs to turn and so many different play patterns that it's going to look really, really bad the first 5 or 6 times people try to play it. And probably after that, I think it's going to be more powerful than it looks. I'm going to try to build decks that have this in it. And I think it's going to overperform, but I think the decks are going to underperform because I'm terrible at playing these strategies. So
yeah, that's all very fair. All right. I think the next card that we have on our list is also no. The next card on our list was an Aura Shaper, but I actually snuck in an EDH card because I think this next card is really messed up in EDH. Okay, so the next card we have is Duke Atrios the 24th, who's a 5-drop, 4/4 Vigilance. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, create a treasure token unless that pays 1. Then create a 1/1 white Merfolk creature token unless that player pays 1. So, and notably, it also has a Wooburg activated ability that's just this massive Anthem Vigilance Indestructible Like you could hold this back and do it in response to a board wipe, or you could do this after it attacks since it has vigilance. Like that's a really good Wooburg activation. One of the reasons I think this card's messed up in EDH is that second ability. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, scales up ridiculously into EDH, and most people won't bother paying the 1, let alone the 2. So you're going to get a bunch of treasure tokens and a bunch of board tokens. I think if it didn't have the third ability, I'd be lower on it though, because it'd be mono white. And while this is a powerful effect, saying it's mono white in terms of how easy it is to cast, and it's this really powerful effect, and you get to play all 5 colors with it, that's one of the things that I think usually makes EDH generals go from good to, oh god, when you get to just play all of these extra colors.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we know Rhystic
in
Study
terms
is
of
a
actual
powerful
MS,
card. Just
yeah,
and obviously there the difference is that you're getting hard card advantage, but like the fact that you're essentially just getting free value off of your opponents playing the game is just so powerful. The
I don't think this card gets there in MSEM proper though.
Oh, absolutely not. Like, you compare this to, like, the Scions, it's nowhere close.
That's obviously why we should
So,
make it also count on your spells. I think that this is
ooh,
yeah.
now that's how
Yeah,
you storm
whenever a
off.
player casts a spell, create a treasure token unless that play, just a storm enabler, and just okay,
Yeah,
cool.
what could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so our next card is Idyllic Odyssey. So Idyllic Odyssey is a really innocent looking card, but I think it's actually a really powerful glue piece for a lot of these Concord decks. Um, most of the kind of Concord decks that we've currently seen have been blue-green, centered around Tameo. And while I think those decks are obviously powerful, I do think that the blue-white Concord deck that Morgan was on this GP is also actually fairly powerful. So Idyllic Odyssey is 1 white for an enchantment. When it enters, you get a 1/1 Merfolk creature token. Concord at the beginning of combat in your turn. If there are 4 more card types amongst permanents you control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control. That creature gains lifelink until end of turn. So Idyllic Odyssey puts you at 3 out of 4 Concord types immediately because you have land, creature, enchantment. It's hard to remove. Like no one's going to spend a pith wild on this, and it provides you this long ongoing value that can scale in really stupid ways. Founding Hero getting a +1/+1 counter every single turn is a really terrifying clock. Um, and gaining lifelink also just like really insulates you against aggro. If you have Concord out the turn you play this, it's effectively a 2/2 because you play it pre-combat. Like the floor on this card is fine, but the number of synergies it has are insane. And it's such an innocuous looking card. Like you can easily spend 4 of them.
Especially since like it by itself, it provides 2 Concord types. You're gonna have a land, so that's a third. So you just need like a random artifact or like a planeswalker or something to turn it on. Which if you build your deck right, it should be trivial to turn this on like as early as turn 2 perhaps with an artifact creature or something.
Yeah, and I absolutely have to echo the sentiment. I do think the blue-white version will probably be better in the long run, since a card like with cards like Citywide Automation, which like that one card turns on Concord all by itself without requiring anything else, and I think that's really, really potent.
Yeah, I think a great comparison point for this is a card like Legion's Landing. An
I love
innocuous
that example.
1 mana white enchantment that creates a 1/1 and has long game value. No one ever spends a removal spell on Legion Landing, and no one ever spends a removal spell on the token. So this is just value that you'll get for the entire game. And it's Legion's Landing proved to be an incredibly powerful card. I think this will too.
Oh, God,
Yeah, I
imagine like
strong agree with
turning
that.
this into a Seto-san.
Yeah, I mean that kills people really fast.
Very,
Like
very fast.
part of the truth is like just curving this into I don't know. You curve this, and then the next turn you play Academics Claymore or Staff of Equilibrium. You swing with a 2/2 lifelink, and if your opponent doesn't immediately do something, you're gonna equip that token up. You're gonna be swinging with a 3/3 that has like a ridiculous Saboteur effect. And if they do answer it, then you play the Seto-san next turn or something like that. Like there's so many different ways that you could apply pressure and juke your opponent. Um, This might be my favorite white card in this set, actually, just because of how many different things it does.
Yeah, honestly, I was looking at this, and the immediate thing that I thought of was the glow spore, whatever. It was just like, oh look, there's jellyfish, and it makes a 1/1 token on ETB, like, and it's an enchantment. I was like, oh okay. They just from all of that, it felt like a very pip card. But of course, the way that it enables synergies is very different. No, like, you don't really need to flicker this one.
So, the next card we should move on to, because we have a lot of cards to get through, is another Aura Shaper. So Lily Reed Triton is 1 white for a 1/1. Enters the battlefield, you get an aura, which is enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked by a creature with power 3 or greater. So again, the floor of this is a Savannah Lions with evasion. I don't know how to explain, but Savannah Lions is a card that's always very close to playable, and the second you add some relevant upside, it gets really exciting. Lily Reed Triton's upside is absurd, both having evasion and being able to change where the power's on, and also it's effectively an enchantment creature for Concord stuff. Like, I think every single Aura Shaper deck should start with this card. Maybe after your 4 copies of Idyllic Odyssey.
Yeah, I looked at, like, I saw this in the GP list, and I'm like, what? Like, that can be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater is, like, I mean, on itself, like, if you're just assuming, like, square stats, that it's pretty good, because it's like, oh, okay, at least they have to trade. Obviously there's some stuff like Sporeful Protector and things that are playable in the format that will still be able to block this, but it becomes so much more insane when you can just drop it on something that's already chunky, and it's just like, well, yeah, this is effectively unblockable, because they're either hemorrhage board presence horribly, or you just kill them.
Yep.
Yeah, oh god, like curving Founding Hero into this?
Yeah, giving Founding Hero the evasion and bonus power probably scales really hard.
Yeah, and it's just being a 1-drop that is useful both in the late and early game is quite potent. I think it's kind of just the power of, like, lots of these Aura Shaper cards, is that they can give you that little bit of reach you need if you draw them late, but they're also just like solid things to start off aggressively with. So you like, unlike some other aggro cards where sometimes you're like, oh man, this is not the time to be drawing this. It's like, no, yeah, this is just good at any point in the game.
It's always the time to be drawing this. So I think the last card that is an important piece in the kind of Aura Shaper deck that we've been discussing here is the next card, which is Marrow Legend Maker. So 1 white for a 1/2, not a great stat line. Like, genuinely, you don't want to be playing 1 power aggro creatures if you can help it. Whenever it attacks, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your library and grab an Aura, Aura Shaper, or equipment card from among them. I haven't done the Hyper or Geo, but I think if you're running, like, I don't know, a decent density of those, like 20-ish total of any of those 3, this card's good enough. And I don't think it's that hard to get there. I might be wrong, but if your 1 white 1/2 is drawing a card and it's not just drawing, it's drawing action every time it attacks, like, we had to nerf By the Sea for a similar reason. This requires more building around it to be good, so I definitely don't think it's like the same thing. But I think
By
that's
the Sea
a
also
pretty powerful thing.
could potentially make 2 bodies, but yeah.
Yeah. Although that definitely isn't, like, that wasn't the part of By the Sea that we said this is too good.
Yeah, fair.
The original version of this card did that trigger when it entered the battlefield too.
Yeah, that probably would have been more of an issue.
That would not have been fair. As is, I think this is pretty good, especially with all of the 2-drop Aura Shapers that can sometimes just thunk an Aura on this to get it through on turn 2.
Yeah, this carrying Auras really well is something I hadn't considered, but definitely helps.
Yeah, just another one of the knobs that I'll forget how to play when I'm trying to play the deck.
So true.
But also, like, I feel like it's one of those things where, like, when you look at the cards individually, it doesn't feel like, but then I feel like when you're, like, looking at a hand of cards and you're just playing it, you're like, oh, my opponent played a blocker. How do I get through? Yeah, I'll just slap an aura on it. Like, I feel like it'll probably just, like, as the situations come up, I feel like it'll just be intuitive to be like, yeah, okay, we'll just play to whatever's on the board right now. And I think that's just, like, the flexibility there is so strong.
Oh yeah, Pip, to answer your question, I ran the numbers real quickly, and with about 24 aura shapers, auras, and equipment, you've got about a 93% chance of hitting at least one
Alright.
task.
And we've talked about like 2 aura shapers so far that seem really playable. So you run 4 copies of each of those. You run 4 copies of the red-white one from Way. So we're up to 12. That number is actually looking kind of hard to get particularly higher, actually.
I think you could probably hit 20 with like some good equipments.
Yeah, you can definitely get 20 with good equipment. I mean, I guess
Also
you just
notably,
chuck in
like,
temp trees and call it a day.
Yeah, temp trees.
But
Yeah, I was about to say it does hit a card we're about to talk about.
Yeah, okay, so let's look
yeah,
at the
so
first blue card over here, which is
yeah,
Bone-Tooth Darter, which it's 1 blue Merfolk Rogue. The Slipstream part is irrelevant, but it has sacrifice this, counter target instant planeswalker or sorcery spell unless its controller plays one. And we've seen like similar cheap, like there's a Siren
First
Storm
Catcher
Chamber.
and Judge is familiar.
What? Oh yeah, Judge is familiar.
In canon,
But like I think like
yeah.
there's like Siren Storm Tamer. There was the Spirit one for one, and then
Oh sure.
What was there's also an actual faction.
Curse Catcher
Curse Catcher
is the Merfolk one.
Yeah, so lots of like
That's the old
analogs to
school one.
this in canon Magic. So we've seen, and usually like I feel like the Curse Catcher and the Spirit one usually played well because of their tribal implications, but Siren Storm Tamer was kind of just good in general as a tempo card. Of course, that wasn't standard usually, so I'm not sure how this will pan out in actual factual MSEM. What do y'all think?
This older format. I think actually Slipstream is pretty relevant on this card in particular. Because the style of decks that want this effect are also trying to get in by little edges, and sometimes the board will get gummed up in ways that mean they can't get over the finish line. Slipstream helps this contribute to that. I don't think it's like great. Like I wouldn't play this card for the Slipstream, but I think the Slipstream does meaningfully help this card. I don't know. I think this card's good. I think 1 mana is a very small tax unless you're really choking your opponent in a lot of other ways. Like if you have a bunch of other tax effects, or you have like Rishid import style things. I think this card might struggle in MSEM proper, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's an effect that we've seen be powerful in Magic before. I'm not convinced it'll be powerful here, but I'm ready to be proven wrong.
I think the fact that it does hit planeswalkers is what's key here, because people are usually looking to curve those out as soon as they can get them, and being able to delay like a Tameo, for instance, by 1 turn can be very useful.
Okay, let's move on to Encapsulate, which I don't know if this is a good card, but it's a sweet card. So Encapsulate's blue, instant. Counter target creature spell. You may cast a copy of that spell. However, you still have to pay the costs. So the floor of this is a harder to cast Remove Soul. Remove Soul has not been an MSEM playable card historically. So many of MSEM's scariest decks that you need counter spells against do not care about creature spells, and the creature decks can get in underneath a Remove Soul, or you're trading in a way that's kind of inefficient. So the floor of this, not great. The ceiling on this is pretty amazing, though. If you can produce relevant colors of mana, this is kind of a 2-mana mind control in some ways.
Yeah, the problem is
that's
obviously
true.
being able to produce the mana and also holding up that mana while you have interaction. Because I feel like by the time you get to that point in the game where you have mana to hold up interaction and also play something, you probably just want to like have win cons that you can play out yourself. You know what I mean? Like obviously like maybe if they're also flash speed, then you can run out the encapsulate. But I think that like I feel like I feel like you have to really like I feel like this feels like weirdly kind of Timmy-ish because it's like you have those like big moments, but then I don't know if it actually how often that'll actually play out.
I kind of agree that you play this card because it leads to cool story moments rather than because it is the most efficient answer you can be running.
Yeah, and imagine I think this would be like actually maybe like a lot more playable if it did the Thought Blossom thing, where it both fixed your mana
Oh,
and
of
let you play it
course.
at any time.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah.
sounds probably too good, but
Mm-hmm. But yeah.
I will say that after piloting a green-blue deck in this GP, one of the things that you have a lot of trouble with is just bigger threats. So teching these in the sideboard could be fun. I don't think it's ever going to be good, but it's a fun idea to ramp up to 8 mana and then be able to counter your opponent's 6-drop because it's just bigger than what you have. It's a deck that historically is going to struggle with interacting on board and being able to just mind control your opponent's threat before they even get its enter the battlefield effect could be cool. I think it needs a different meta, but it has some applications somewhere, I'm sure.
I feel like we keep dancing around this idea of mind controls are good, and it's kind of hard to have that conversation without dealing with the fact that we already have an absurdly playable mind control in the format that also synergizes with all of these other cards. And until
Yeah.
something changes about Temp Treason, I just can't imagine wanting to register any of these other ones.
Pretty
True.
much.
Yeah.
Also, before we move on to the next card, I want to quickly go back to the Bone Tooth Starter because I realized that it actually kind of works well with Shinrei of the Darting Way because you can recur it for free taxing, or if you have something else you want to
Oh, it's a
recur
rogue.
yeah, it is a rogue,
It's a
so it works
rogue.
out with Shinrei. So I thought that was kind
Okay.
of a cute place to explore it potentially.
Yeah, that makes me mildly higher on it. I don't feel like those decks really needed help disrupting, you know, decks that rely on instant sorceries and planeswalkers. Those tend to be the easiest matchups for that deck. But still, like the core idea is a cool thing to have, especially because Slipstream plays well with Deception.
Yep, yep.
All right, let's talk about the first of the 4 blue draw spells we're about to. Well, I guess like 7. Most of the rest of the blue cards we're about to talk about are draw spells or cards that act like draw spells. So strap in. Um, Eye of the Beholder is 1 blue for a sorcery. Look at the top card of your library. You can put in your graveyard. So kind of sorcery speed surveil Aunt. But it has pressure X blue blue. If you cast it for its pressure cost, instead of drawing 1 card, you draw X cards. So this is the sort of card that's just kind of insanely powerful because the floor on it is a fine card. It's slightly worse than Monkey Shines, not substantially, um, and people love playing Monkey Shines. But in the late game, your Monkey Shines turns into a Blue Sun Zenith like. That is terrifying. The main issue I think with this card is the fact that it's a sorcery, and most blue control decks that want that sort of effect really don't want to have to tap out for it. But like with that put aside, just in the early game, you can cycle it, you can hit land drops, etc. And the late game, you're just like, boom, let's go.
Yeah, the one time that I've tested this card, I put it in a deck that after testing I realized literally would never cast it for its pressure cost, and it still was good because it
Yeah.
still was just a good cantrip. I think I cast it for its pressure cost once, and I drew 2 cards, and it felt miserable, but uh, that was because the deck was bad, not because the card was bad. I think this card's great. I think that a lot of graveyard decks can get a lot of good use out of this. And if you're filling your graveyard, I think this is probably the cantrip that I'd want to play. I think it's comparing it to Monkey Shines is difficult. It depends on how all in on your graveyard you are, but I think that it's still a comparison that you should be making, and people love putting Monkey Shines in decks, like you said. So I think this will get played.
Yep.
Let's get to the next draw spell. So this one's an instant. Blue and 3, Field Flow. Draw cards equal number of cards in your hand, then discard 4 cards. It also has cycling 1 blue. Everyone that I've talked to thinks this card is good. I think it's trash, and I really can't figure out where we're differing. A lot of my logic comes from the fact that when I play draw spells in decks, I want them to be amazing top decks. Like I want to draw them and be able to say, cool. I've stabilized the board. I've gone 1-for-1. Both my opponent and I are low on resources. I'm going to cast this and pull far ahead. And Feel the Flow doesn't do that. Feel the Flow is only good when you're in the kind of holding pattern where you're at, like, let's say you need to be at 6 cards in hand, this plus 5 other cards, before this is card neutral, right? Because then you draw 5, discard 4. Yeah, that's card neutral, since you spend a card to cast this. So this is only card advantage if you cast it when you're at 7 cards in hand. So I feel like if you like this card, it's probably being held up by the cycling 1 blue, but like I can't imagine wanting to cast it.
Yeah.
No, I think this card's awful. I think this card isn't playable.
Okay, good.
I guess unless you're doing like some kind of breakthrough shenanigans where you're, yeah, no.
Yeah, if you're
is-
trying to discard your entire hand, this card is like not the worst.
True.
But also, if you're doing that, you probably won't be doing it for long, because usually when we catch wind of that sort of thing, it's gone.
Yeah, and also at 4 mana, it's not exactly an efficient way of doing that. So it's like, oh, okay, you're comboing off on turn 4? Cool.
Yep.
Now something that is card advantage.
Yeah, I'm really high on this card. Gaze Deeper is 3 blue for an instant. Pressure 1 blue. Draw 3 cards. You might not know this, but this was pretty much how Worlds Away worked originally. The card has gone through like 2 different iterations by now, but it's a 5-drop that costs 3 mana under a certain condition, and it's an instant draw 3 cards. I think this card is fairly powerful. I don't think it is like the actual factual nuts, but I think if you're getting your graveyard fairly full anyway, like if you're playing a Bug Hunter's Hideout control style deck, I would be really interested in registering Gaze Deeper in the card advantage slot.
Yeah, I agree. The original Worlds Away was disgusting because you hit its condition just by playing Magic. You just played 4 lands and then it was on. And so it required no deck building constraints. This requires, I mean, it doesn't really require a deck building constraint, but if you don't build your deck around it, the game has to go way late for its pressure to be on. And if you want the pressure to be on earlier, you have to build your deck to turn it on. I think it's a very interesting card. I think it's a very powerful card. And I agree that this is the card advantage slot that I would want in any deck where you're putting cards into your graveyard other than casting spells.
Yeah, I do agree that you need to be putting cards in your graveyard slightly faster than just, oh, I cast a spell and I cracked a fetch land. Like, you probably need something that self-mills you, or like, a strategic planning-like effect. But once you have it, good to go.
Okay, and next up we have Happy
Another blue
Meta,
draw spell.
which is, technically still a draw spell. It's 4 mana for 2/2 with Slipstream, but when it deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw a card for each card type among spells you've cast this turn. It itself is an enchantment creature, so if you have some way to give it haste, it'll draw 2 cards, but usually it's just going to be like, you probably want to play this in a Concord-like deck, where you can, with like cheap Concord enablers, like, what's the 1 mana enchantment from ATB?
Sights
Sights
Beyond.
Beyond.
Yeah, Sights Beyond, stuff like that, where you can like, in the like after you play this, just kind of chain those and then gas all the way back up. But still, a 4 mana 2/2 is just kind of steep. I think is ultimately what holds us
It
back.
dies so easily.
Single villainy trigger, dot death.
Also, like, it being an enchantment opens it up technically to more vulnerabilities, not less. Like, now you can like just hit it with just random, like, oh, destroy target enchantment. You can get it Jade Vault Reclaimer. Probably not fun if that happens. I think this card's fun. Like, the ceiling on this card's exciting. The floor is basically non-existent though, and Tameo exists.
Yeah, if it drew according to what you already had and not what you cast, it would be so much better.
I do think an important thing to realize is it's not permanent types. So if you cast an instant or sorcery, it will draw a card. If you cast both of those, it'll draw 2 cards. I think that's realistically where it's going to shine, is not in Concord decks, but in like a kind of top end for a like slower tap out control style deck, where if this is your only creature, it is unblockable.
Yeah.
That's true, and it's tough to keep in removal against a deck that has, like 3 Happy Mantas as the only creatures.
Yeah. The main issue with doing that is then your opponent has any removal spells, the Happy Mantas are going to eat all of it because there's no other targets.
True. I think this card's probably not playable, but I like to imagine a world in which it is. And look at
Yeah.
how happy he is. Come on.
Unrelenting joy in the face of total doom. Alright, so let's talk about the next blue draw spell. We have Hit the Bottom, which is 1 blue for a sorcery, and it's Careful Study, except if you cast it for 3 mana, and you had 7 or more cards in your graveyard to do that, you don't need to discard the cards. I think conceptually this is an absurd card. Like,
This is what, like, our 5th, like, 1 mana draw
Yeah,
to
we have
discard
we have
to in the
we have
format?
many careful studies in the format.
yeah. So, in terms of Careful Studies, we're now at the point where you pick the ones that are best for your deck, which means, sorry, Whirling Thoughts, you're never seeing the light of day again. But I think when you choose between this card versus Wheat from Chaff versus the Unquenched Greed, like, I think that's a decision that you make. I think this is generally the correct one to make, though. Well, Wheat from Chaff is probably better in a deck that cares about the artifacts. I think Unquenched Greed you only want to do if you're on a Parrot Pool style deck or into Warrior Valley, and Hit the Bottom is great because one thing that's just true about Careful Studies is they're bad in games that end up being about fair card like advantage, where they're great when you're like doing something busted, where you're like filtering cards into your graveyard, and then by doing that you're cheating on spell costs or whatever. But the second the game starts becoming about grinding, they're all card advantage negative, and that's why Wheat from Chaff has been so powerful, is because for 3 mana you can make it a draw 2, draw 3, discard 2. Oh, it's now card neutral. Well, this is card advantage. When you have pressure, you can choose between either I want a looting right now or I want just a divination. And while divination is a constructed playable card, when you start stapling it onto things that are, it becomes a lot more appetizing.
Yeah, I think if you're building a deck that wants to cast Careful Study on turn 1 every single game, Wheat from Chaff is the best, and then Hit the Bottom will be second. If somehow you're building a deck that wants to cast Careful Study on like turn 4, I don't know what deck that would be, but I think Hit the Bottom is just better than Wheat from Chaff there, because sometimes you'll just cast Divination instead, and you won't have to discard 2 cards, and it'll feel great.
Agreed.
But we've seen many decks that are on like 12 balls or 16 balls of Careful Studies, and I think Hit the Bottom is easily in the top 4.
I'd agree with all of that.
Yeah, its name is kind of misleading because it's definitely not the bottom of the barrel for our careful study options.
Whirling Thoughts like, guys, I'm here.
Okay, so next up we have Lord of the Bubble Dome. So if you ever wanted to play Merfolk in MSEM, now is your time to shine because, like the name says, it is a lord, gives other Merfolk you control +1/+1, and also gives them Slipstream. I think the one thing that hurts about this is
You
not
do have to
natively
pay
having
to
Slipstream
but
means that you have to like at least invest 4 mana into this to get like a good attack with like this and one other Merfolk. So it starts getting problematic quickly when you're like, man, I want to make my whole board evasive, but that takes like 10 mana now, and it's like, ugh. So you can get in like 1 or 2, usually because even in like aggro decks, you're probably not getting enough mana like to like make 3 of your creatures slipstreamable. So
Yeah, let's call Lord of the Bubble Dome like it is. This is a lord for a tribe that's awful in MSEM. There's no Merfolk deck. There might be an Aura Shaper's deck, but the Merfolk deck that we're familiar with from Canon Magic plays like 18 lords or something, and this is our only one. You can't get away with just 1 2-mana lord. If people wanted to play decks with 2-mana lords, they should just play hounds.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I think so. Valoran Tidecaller is a fairly powerful card and kind of has been begging to be played with other Merfolk, but it's not a traditional lord, and I don't think it gets there yet. But I do think every single lord like this we add does build on each other. So basically, this isn't a card you should worry about now, but the next MSEM set with Merfolk, remember this exists and go back and reevaluate.
Yeah, agreed. The next time Dodger submits an underwater set.
Yeah, truly. So the next card we have is Mina, Jeweled Minnow, who's a very cute card. 1 blue, 1/1, flash. Also legendary enchantment creature, fish. So very exciting type line. And you can cast the first spell that's an enchantment, instant, or sorcery with converted mana cost 1 each turn without paying its mana cost. So one of the things that's really scary about this card, just conceptually, is it's effectively a 1-drop that untaps the land when it enters the battlefield if you have other flash things. So you can go, Mina, pass the turn to you. When you play your turn 1 or turn 2 play, I can spell stutter it.
What's the blue-red thing from Kahambo that works with this?
Blue-red thing from
Plaxaltal Piari.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Plaque seems cool here. I think so. One of the things that I started building a Mina deck and then immediately quit when I realized that I couldn't cast Cosmic Sinkhole off Mina, because that's you don't want to cast that spell without paying its mana cost.
True.
But the kind of conceptual idea of a tempo deck that leans heavily on Mina as a way of cheating on mana and thus being able to play more proactive threats is pretty appealing. And I don't think it's very hard to build around her. But at the same time, I think there's a fundamental flaw with how small ball she requires you play. Where if you index really heavily on 1-drops, one of the consequences is you don't have like these really powerful spiky haymakers, because 1-drops are not known for being those things. So you need to figure out a balance of how many Mina hits is enough to make Mina worth it. I think if she produces about 2 mana, she's worth it. So you need a lot to be able to do that twice. But you need to, at the same time, make sure that you don't build a deck where mid-range decks just smush you.
Yeah, they said that Cosmic Sinkhole was strictly better Force Spike, and Dodger's like, oh, no.
See? Now it's balanced.
No, I think my favorite thing about Mina is her applications in Phoenix decks, because you can cast 3 instants and sorceries on turn 2. It lets you get a little faster, and if your deck is just all in attack with Phoenixes, I think she's particularly powerful in that strategy. Plus, she does work alongside Plaxaltal Piari because you want to play them in the same decks. I think most of the decks that are going to play Mina are going to be playing Careful Studies, and so hit the bottoms and weed from chaff and all of that nonsense, and then just Scorch. And I've played the deck. It feels powerful. It feels very fragile, but look at the card. This is a powerful, fragile card. You're getting what you're expecting.
Yeah, it's weird how all or nothing this cute little fish is.
Wait, quick rules question.
You cannot stack alternative costs, and casting things without paying their mana cost is an alternative cost.
No, I mean the tail on... Oh, yeah, never mind.
Oh, I thought you were asking about if you could pressure a hit the bottom with Mina, and the answer to that is no. If you have a tail that costs 1 mana, you can tell the tail with Mina for free. But the tail on Panya very much is not 1 mana.
Yeah, all this like Tybalt's trickery stuff is messing with my head.
All right. So now we're back to the blue draw spells. So here we have Truth Beyond Belief. So for blue 5, it's an instant. Pressure 4 mana and discard your hand. Reveal the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of non-creature, non-land cards among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So one thing that I've always wanted to do, and I for a while tried to build decks to do it, was I wanted to leverage Ride the Storm in a control deck, because that card is insane in a control deck. And it did work out. It was really hard to get the artifact enchantment count high enough. I tried it for a little bit in a kind of legend weaving shell, but it turns out that supporting blue and white and black all in the same deck, kind of a mess. So I kind of gave up on it. This is way easier to enable, because it, instead of requiring 4 artifacts and enchantments to get it down to 4 mana, you just need to have 7 cards in your graveyard. and we've established how easy that is. It does require you to discard your hand first. So, A, if they counter it, you're in deep shit, and B, it's not as much card advantage. Like it's not a good card draw spell to cast when you have 4 cards in hand. It's a great card draw spell to cast when you have 2 or less cards in hand. So that's kind of weird little niche for it to have, though. But I think this card is powerful, and I think that both control decks and combo decks that can leverage it should be looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. You were talking about Feel the Flow, that you want your draw spells to be great top decks, and this is an obscenely good top deck, assuming that you've turned on pressure. 4 mana, discard nothing, draw 7 cards is a pretty powerful effect. This isn't that because you don't hit lands, but 4 mana, draw all of the best cards from your top 7 is going to be very powerful. I think this is a particularly exciting card because it's a build around that you don't want to put 4 copies of in your deck, which is something you rarely see. It's the kind of card that, if you draw 3 of them, you feel horrible, but it's so powerful that you can build an entire deck that's just a Truth Beyond Belief control deck, and it's gonna look really cool when it works. I don't know what the shell looks like. I think Hersey's probably gonna have to be the one who builds it.
You probably just throw in Whisper Exploration, make it bug, call it a day.
Throw in a couple of Hunter's Hideouts. I mean, so I think the fundamental issue is going to be, when is this better than Gaze Deeper? When do you want this versus when do you want Gaze Deeper? Gaze Deeper is way easier to hardcast, is 1 mana less to pressure, draws fewer cards, but it can draw lands. Like, I think one thing that's easily overlooked about Truth Beyond Belief is if you cast this, when you're at 4 or 5 mana and you really need to get to your 5th, 6th, 7th land drop, you can miss that. Like,
That's
you
true.
draw no lands in the 7 cards you draw here. I hadn't thought about that until I was looking back and forth between the two of them, because I've cast a lot of Worlds Aways to try to get my 5th land drop, and I'm realizing that maybe Gaze Deeper is just better than Truth Beyond Belief, but Truth Beyond Belief is so much more exciting. So it's I want to do that.
Yeah, which is why I think this is truly a build around, because you want to be in a deck that doesn't need the lands when you draw your cards. And you need to have pressure turned on, and you need to be emptying your hand so that you don't care about discarding it. There's a lot of different knobs you need to turn, but the end result is so powerful that, we've seen how powerful Dig Through Time is, and that just takes 2.
It's true.
Granted, that costs 2 mana, but
yeah, we're gonna ignore that real quick though. That's literally Dig Through Time.
Literally better than Dig Through Time.
So the next card we have is Weight of the Oceans. For blue, instant counter target spell if you have more cards in your graveyard than that spell's controller. So I think this is the 2021 version of Outsmart. And I think, unlike Outsmart, it might actually be good. It goes in the same decks that we've been discussing, like these blue decks that are filling up their graveyard to enable Hunter's Hideout or pressure cards or what have you. The thing that worries me about Weight of the Oceans, or Weight of Oceans, is it's actually really hard to have this be a hard counter on too, if you're on the draw. On the play, you have good odds of having cracked more fetch lands than your opponent, but it's not equal to or more than. You have to straight up have more than. So you probably have to have played more spells than them and cracked more fetch lands than them, and some combination of those two that ends up with the total. Which I'm always very hesitant to run controls to run counter spells that can just turn off depending on what my opponent is doing. Because if your opponent goes turn 1 I don't know, Monkey Shines, they've effectively just blanked every copy of Weight of Oceans in your deck. And I'm not a huge fan of that. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, this seems like a sideboard card to me. I think there are some decks that can play it main deck just because they go so all in on the graveyard. I know someone was talking about its applications in the Infuse Storm decks, because all that deck wants to do is put 18, 20 cards in its graveyard by turn 5. Weight of Oceans is great there if you're also leaving up 2 mana to interact. I don't know that that's the right move for that deck, but it is good in a deck that's just dumping everything in its graveyard. But like you said, if you're running into that matchup and you're trying to counter their spells, and you're just I have an Oracle's Vision on turn 1 and I'm hoping that fuels my Weight of Oceans, and that's going to feel miserable. So unless you're the deck in the format that puts the most cards in your graveyard de facto, I would put this in the sideboard and bring it in against decks that just aren't doing anything with their graveyard. Because if you are putting any cards into your graveyard at all against a deck that isn't, this is Counterspell. And we know Counterspell to be a pretty effective Magic card.
Yeah, I'm just horrified for the day that someone's gonna be playing a mirror with this, and like it goes like turn one Oracle's Vision into, oh, but actually here's my turn one's Oracle Vision of my own, and it's just like the neither both players are desperately trying to fill up their graveyards as fast as possible, but like in doing so they're just evening it up, and they just neither of them can cast their Weight of the Oceans, and it's just like, oh, okay, pain.
Worth also remembering that Oracle's Vision is actually symmetrical. Like, it doesn't mill you any more than, or doesn't give you more graveyard advantage than just like casting any 1 mana spell.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I'm saying I'm assuming that they probably play, like if you're going to be milling yourself, you're probably like if you're playing if you're playing a card that wants you to have cards in grave, you're probably also going to have additional graveyard synergies that Oracle's Vision helps enable. Was my thought.
All right, so the next card we have, I would love to talk about because this is Abyssal Oracle. Abyssal Oracle is 1 and a black for a 2/1 Merfolk Spellshaper. Black, tap, discard a card, search your library for a card, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. You lose 2 life. So if that effect isn't familiar to you, Abyssal Oracle casts Vampiric Tutor every single turn that you want it to. That's a pretty powerful effect. You might also notice it actually has my name on the designer credit because this is a card I designed for a powered cube, and that Dodger asked if he could reprint in Elmare, because he thought it flavorfully fit. So this card is obviously an insanely powerful effect. It is repeated card disadvantage. Vampiric Tutor is a card disadvantage tutor. That's one of the weaknesses to it. But still, the fact that you can effectively use this as a tutor on your second turn, on the first turn you're untapping with it, where you go turn 2 Abyssal Oracle, turn 3 during my upkeep activate Abyssal Oracle, that's pretty scary. I think the scariest application involves using it as a discard outlet for Reanimator targets while tutoring up Reanimator spells. But I think this card, like, basically I don't know what this card breaks, but I'm pretty sure it breaks something.
I think that like the weird part is like because like yeah, for the Reanimator example, I feel like you can play Forbidden Truths, and there would be kind of similar efficacy without being vulnerable to creature removal. I think Abyssal Oracle is in this weird place where like I'm not even sure like what an MSEM would want it, even though it's like such a strong card. But I feel like the cube environment is weirdly suited to it because people don't have like whole hosts of, even in like interaction heavy decks, they usually don't have like whole hosts of interaction because that's just how cube works. You don't get like a bunch of like you don't get like a huge amount of redundancy unless something has gone very right for you. So you can kind of get, and like most people will also save their removal for something that they feel is more threatening and just try to like advance their own game plan when playing against Abyssal Oracle. I feel like I feel like in the cube environment, it's like okay, yeah, you can set up like some combos or insane turns if your opponent kind of stumbles and doesn't draw one of their 2 removal pieces. Well, I feel like in MSEM, like ironically, like things are just kind of faster and more deadly, or like people are like their decks are like a much more streamlined and focused to the point where they're like either they can much more effectively ignore Abyssal Oracle or just machine gun it down with one of their many interaction pieces. So like I don't know. I feel like, and especially like like you play this versus Burn, I feel like you just feel so sad. Mm-hmm.
I mean, versus Burn, you just trade off versus one of their ground creatures.
Yeah, true.
Sure, but like that's not where you want to be.
Sure, but it's like I don't know. I think 2 mana kill their Banished Companion. Like, that is a fine card in a pinch. I agree with you that there are matchups where it's bad. I'm not convinced Burn is one of them. Just because, like, yeah, the effect says you lose 2 life, but just don't spell shape if you don't want to spell shape. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Abyssal Oracle feels to me like a card that has the potential to be very powerful in a deck that is 100% degenerate, and has no potential to be powerful in a deck that is doing things that are remotely fair.
Okay, but consider you discard a Madness card.
All right, I'm considering it. You discard a Madness card to cast it for, I guess, card neutral, and then get to set up your next draw.
Yeah.
And your next draw is
Right.
another Fiery Temper.
Yeah, and I usually
Pip,
kinda
build
love
me
this
the
in,
value
like,
Abyssal
when playing
Oracle
this
deck.
in Aghanos Cube, like playing it in a fair deck was actually kind of fine because you like in a toolboxy like deck where it's like, okay, I can kind of like play to my opponent's tempo and just like fish up whatever I need, and then like once I feel confident that their shield's down, just okay, combo piece, let's get it, kind of thing. So I think that like fair applications are probably possible where you're just kind of toolboxing, but also like there comes a question of unless you're like super unfocused, we probably have better toolbox tools in the format already. Yeah, okay. So next up we have Buried at Sea, which is basically instant speed Entomb, but also you already need pressure on, so it's not actually instant speed Entomb on turn 1.
Entomb is instant speed, Caillou.
I just saw instant on the type line and I was like, I gotta mention it, right? Important piece of information. But
yeah, so I'm not convinced this card is good. We already have the 3-drop 2/2 creature that entombs something on ETB. I feel like this card really wants to be played alongside like Retrace or like kind of these grindy small edges value cards, but like this is the sort of card you want to cast to entomb a Raven's Crime. This is not the sort of the card you want to cast to entomb a Gristlebrand, if the distinction like makes sense. I don't know. One thing I like about this card is every time I look at this card, I think about the Coffin Dance meme.
Oh my god.
That's all I have to contribute here.
Yeah,
no, I agree.
I can't wait for someone to win a GP and then just have our first live action, or our first like actual photo champion promo. You know?
Yeah, let's go GIF promos.
That would actually be sick.
Now. Xanagan does have one because she is using an art from Gwent.
True.
Trice does not support them, unfortunately.
Big sad.
But I just want to quickly agree with you, Pip. I think that this is a card that could be good if you're casting it like it's Mystical Teachings, but that's not. There's no application for that in MSEM right now, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have Danitra Champion, and yeah, you want to take point on this one, Pip?
Yeah, this card is kind of messed up. So it's a 4-mana 4/3 Death Touch that has pressure, black, exile 6 cards from your graveyard, and technically it also had you can cast from your graveyard for its pressure cost, but that's not actually that didn't work out, so now it has an activated ability instead. But the basic idea is just this is a card that if you have pressure, it's a 1-mana 4/3 Death Touch, but it can basically has to be your only pressure card, because it eats away at its own pressure. It's kind of like a Gurmag Angler like, but the fact that it can provide card advantage via either being milled over and thus being cast from a graveyard, or dying and just like you then cast again, is really probably relevant. That's not the sort of thing you get while also want a scary body. Having 3 toughness is a liability, but I think the card's probably good.
Yep. I'm going to take a moment to shill for Dodger here because this design is really cool. It seems eminently fair in a way that cards that do things like this usually aren't, but also very powerful. I'm willing to be proven wrong on both of those points, but right now it looks just like a really, really cool card that I think definitely does have MSEM applications, but is never going to feel like you're being oppressed by it.
Yeah. Especially because of how much good exile we have. Like, that's the other thing keeping this card in check is even if it's like, oh my god, this card keeps coming back, it's like, well, you could have chosen to do something about that in deck registration. Like, you could have exile right here. The fact that you don't is a decision you made.
You could have activated Spore Flow Protector in response. Like, this does feel so bad against any great targeted Grave Hate.
Mm-hmm.
Although you can keep activating it if you have enough cards in your graveyard.
If you have that many cards in grave, something has gone seriously right.
I do think that one thing that's an issue in MSEM is a lot of our graveyard decks don't have good ways to pivot. So like, I think if you run this card, you also start looking at Initiative and you start looking at like all of these other graveyard synergy cards, and then you just get hosed when your opponent shows up with 4 Memento Moris. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is that this card is very good at being your only graveyard threat, and that's something that you don't generally have with the other graveyard things because they reward you for going really deep. And I think this one you don't need to go that deep on, but I might be wrong there.
Okay.
I think it can do a little bit of both, which is pretty exciting. I agree that you don't need to go deep on it, and it's probably better in shells where you don't. But it also is just another creature that comes back from the graveyard in a shell where you have, 18 creatures that recur and then 24 careful studies.
Yeah.
Not that anyone would play that, but
No, we have only reasonable people here. Alright, so let's talk about Denithra Inquisitor, aka what Cabal Therapist should have been. Not quite, but like close enough. So 1 into black for 2/2. It's both a zombie, a merfolk, and a wizard, so many of those type lines are relevant. And it has a sack ability, 1 black, sack another creature. You can only do this as a sorcery. You get to exile target card in opponent's graveyard, and then you can cast it as long as it remains exiled and do, mana so or mana of any color to do so, which is as pretty hype. So it's not card advantage until your opponent has card advantage cards in their graveyard, but it's exiling them type agnostic. You have as long as you want to cast them, and it mana fixes for you. So like, you kill your opponent's, planeswalker, you sack a creature, you recur their planeswalker. And if that planeswalker can make tokens on a plus, like, this card can ball out of control really fast.
Yeah,
but it's also just a really kind of slow and fair card.
A really scenario where you your opponent has a good ETB creature and you just keep recurring it because you just sack that creature and you're like, yeah, okay, gimme, I'll have it back now.
You have to target, so that's not how it works.
Oh, just 2 copies of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just kindly ask your opponent to entomb 2 copies of the same creature with a value ETB.
I mean, you don't even need the same creature. It could literally just be like
looping between 2.
Yeah, and you don't, and like, I'm not even like, you could literally just, even with like a single creature, you just like what you steal another card from their graveyard that isn't a creature, and then it's just like, oh, okay, that the creature that you sacked goes back to their graveyard, and so you just recur it again, is what I mean. Like,
yeah, but then you need other creature sacrifice is our point.
Ah, yeah, okay. Close enough.
Yeah, it's probably still good, turns out. So let's talk Dawson's Collector. So Dawson's Collector is a jacked merfolk. 1 black for a 2/2. It can't block, but whenever it attacks, you can sacrifice another creature, and if you do, you get a tapped treasure token. So I don't think that ability is that good, but it helps enable a 3rd ability, I guess, which is when you sacrifice your 3rd permanent each turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. I'm kind of low on this card, if I'm being honest. Like, I think this card will be propped up by the fact it's a black 2/2. So like, the floor on it's like pretty okay, but I think it's actually really hard to enable the 3rd ability consistently, and I think that ability is not that good unless you're doing it consistently. I think the 2nd ability is just straight up a trap.
Didn't this used to be insane? I feel like I remember this being insane at some point.
Yeah. No, there were a couple different iterations of this card that were not acceptable, but we went through several different editing stages.
And arrived at this fun synergistic boy.
This feels like a sideboard card against decks that have, like single high impact creatures or planeswalkers. And it feels like only decks that have Sadistic Indulgent main board will want this. Or Sadistic Indulgence, rather.
So Sadistic Indulgence isn't sacrifice, is the notable thing. It's destroying.
True. But I assume that any deck is running that will.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it also enables a 2nd ability. Like, it can do things with fetch lands, but I think 3 fetch lands just isn't realistic. I don't know. I think there's like a lot of things kind of going against this card, and the couple things going in its favor are not great.
Shifting lands.
Yeah, I'm not gonna play Shifting Lands if the payoff is this. Like, Shifting Lands are good when the payoff is literally like Seeker of New Horizons, but most things are not Seeker of New Horizons. the next card I want to talk about is basically Death Shadow, but good.
Right
Oh,
before
sorry.
we jump to that, I do want to mention
right.
that there are probably some decks that just want to run black 2/2, ignore all of the text.
In which case, I feel like
I think
our
in
format
MSEM
has,
that's
like,
unlikely,
so
but
so many other options, like a glut of options.
I misread actually. The card after the next card is the Death Shadow, but good. This card's hype. So, Gloomtide Welk is a 7-mana 4/4 that languishes on ATB. That's not good. What is good is pressure. So for its pressure cost, it's just languish that gives you a 4/4, which is insane. I think the main issue with this card is it's kind of hard to construct scenarios where you have pressure, you have a board to clear, and you can get to your 4th mana source and cast this. Like, a couple things are needing to go right there. But I think it's a really cool sideboard pivot type of card to bring in, or a good like mid-range versus aggro card. Like, it's a very powerful effect. Chupacabras are good. Board wipe stapled creatures, especially a 4/4, which is pretty big, are even better.
Yeah, I think this card is awesome. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've ever read the text box of this card because it costs 7 mana. It's one of those that my eyes just glaze over as soon as I see 5 black because I'm just like, oh, that has no implications. But the pressure cost is super easy to hit, and I think that this, even if it's just a sideboard card, has some real applications. You cast Oracle's Vision, and then pressure's basically already set up with 2 fetch lands and another spell.
I want to play this card with the Will of a Feckle Lord.
Oh God.
Oh,
Mimi big lock.
You might say, wait, you can just Flesh to Rot, but Flesh to Rot doesn't hit 4/4s, and I like killing 4/4s.
How else am I going to kill my opponent's Gloomtide Welk in the mirror?
Exactly.
Come on now.
The Gloomtide Welk mirror.
Coming to MSEM in 2022. Watch, we're gonna look back. We're gonna look back on this video in a year and be like, God damn it! Why did we say anything? Now the meta is just Gloomtide Welk mirrors. The council is sitting with their head in their hands, like, what do we do about this?
There are no numbers to tweak. It's unnerfable.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's perfect as is. It's just the format. Are we wrong? No, it's the format.
After May of 2022, only 4 sets remain.
So, is this the shrimp that guy found in his Cinnamon Toast Crunch?
God.
Man, that joke is just not gonna work when people watch this video like 6 months from now.
It's not gonna land.
That puts such a hard date on when this is filmed. Oh man.
Yeah, if Caillou takes like another 2 months to upload this video, people are going to know. So I lied. The next card is also still not the Death Shadow I wanted to talk about,
it is a
but I
titular
guess we'll talk
card.
about this
It's
one.
pretty sick.
Yeah.
So
Into the Abyss.
Yeah, 2 black. If a card we put into your graveyard from anywhere, you exile it instead. And then if you draw a card, you instead return 2 cards from your graveyard to your hand. And if you can't, you lose the game. So basically, it's technically a lich effect, but oh man, is it ever good? Because I think, like, as long as you have, like, if you're, like, playing a pressure deck or, like, playing any sort of graveyard deck, you can enable this reasonably easily, and then just recurring 2 cards per turn should easily lead you to a win. Of course, if they play Memento Mori, it's like, well, tough luck, Buster. But in situations where your opponent doesn't put grave pressure on you, this is kind of just the nuts. Of course, at 5 mana, it's like, But I think it's a very fun, explosive card.
Didn't we have an 8 mana version of this, like a big blue enchantment or something?
Unified Theory?
Yeah, Unified Theory.
That feels kind of very different.
It doesn't kill you.
One thing that I've heard people compare this to is Ball's Descent, and I agree that Ball is kind of better than this.
Yeah.
The idea with this card is you spend several turns setting up, then you cast this, and if you untap with it, you win the game somehow. I think too many things have to go right for that to happen. I think this is it's a pretty fair Yawgmoth's Will in the grand scheme of things. The one thing it does better than Ball, and better than a lot of these sorts of effects, is it does a better fair value plan. So if you're a control deck and you're just like recurring nothing but answers and win cons and card draw spells, this card's pretty terrifying, especially because it's not a lich effect. If you remove this, you no longer have the and then you lose the game staple to it. So
True.
Yeah. God, this is gonna feel so bad when you get like Tormod's Crypt or some version of that.
Yeah. I'm in general not high on this card. 5 mana is a lot to ask for a card that literally kills you if they exile your graveyard. And Memento Mori sees too much play.
If you want a black enchantment that, gets you card advantage, just Villainy? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, if you want a black enchantment that does a lich effect, just play Deathless Siege. Come on now.
True.
If you want, I think really what we're saying is people should run more Unhallowed Concordant. Sorry,
yeah.
Concordant? Can't remember. The 0/1.
Yeah,
we all know what I mean.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, the 0/1 creature. Exactly.
Tell us more about Death Shadow, but good.
Yes.
Alright, so Nightmares Unseen is 4 mana. Create an XX black horror creature token where X number of cards in your graveyard. That seems kind of mediocre. Unearthed Legion isn't that good. Pressure. 1 black. Pay 5 life. That's insane. So, I don't know if y'all have ever played with Gurmag Angler. But this card makes Gurmag Angler look like a bitch. Yeah, it's technically bad against aggro, but like, it's not that bad. It's like pretty good against counters because if you're setting this up, it's actually going to outsize even their biggest creatures, which like you basically never get to do that against those decks. So I'm really high on that conceptually. I think that a lot of the decks that people are currently playing, where they're trying to play this Delver strategy or Death Shadow strategy, don't work with a lot of threats we currently have. The fact this overlays with Scuttling Gnat very effectively makes me even more interested, where you could play this and Scuttling Gnat, and then some cheap milling and interaction, and you have a stew going. Like, I don't know. I think this is not. I think you need to be reliably casting this for this pressure cost for it to be good, because again, as we established, Unearthed Legion is not exactly nuts. But if you can reliably do that, I think this card is just absurd.
Yeah, I agree.
7 for 1.
I think there are even going to be some matchups where like you cast this on turn 4 as a 4 mana 5/5 and it feels like garbage, but the 4 mana 5/5 blocks a creature or threatens a planeswalker or trades. Like 4 mana 5/5 is not that embarrassing in the grand scheme of things. I also like the idea of the mental mind games of trying to wait until you have 9 cards in your graveyard to make the 9/9 so it doesn't die to the double Gloomtide Wealth turn from your opponent. That's the world I want to live in.
Jesus Christ.
That's the dream.
That's the nightmare. The nightmare unseen.
A reality more hideous than any dream. No, I like this card. I think it's sweet.
I think actually we have a rules issue with this card, which is it's called Nightmares Unseen, but it makes horrors instead of nightmares. So we should get Dodger on that one.
Yes, agreed. Or at least to change it to Horrors Unseen. Dumb name, but at least it matches flavorfully.
Yeah, can't wait to get someone DQ'd for playing this card and making a horror token. Dumb motherfucker. Thought they could pull a fast one on me.
So let's talk about Oceanographer. It's a 1 black 1/1 with Slipstream. We've discussed Slipstream a lot. It's an artifact creature, so some mild synergies there. Tap, salvage a creature card. I don't know if you guys know this, but 1-drops that draw you cards are pretty scary. This kind of draws you a card every other turn, as long as you have creatures that you are playing and finding ways to sacrifice, or if you're milling over them. So going Oceanographer turn 1, turn 2, some self-mill, tap Oceanographer, grab a creature card for them, turn 3, recur the creature card. Like, that's slow, but it's a lot of value to have on an evasive 1-drop. I don't know. I'm not saying this card is like the second coming, but this is a fairly powerful effect.
it's a little slow, but like everything else is there. It's an artifact creature, so you get synergies there. It works like the fact that you have to hit for salvage doesn't really matter because it has slipstream, so you can just attack with itself. Eh, I think the problem is it's just one of those things where it's like I have the question like where would I play this? It's just like it's like oh yeah, it's unquestionably good, but like when I start like sitting down and I'm like deck, what deck? I'm just like blanked. I don't know if that's just me.
Yeah, my issue with this is that I can't imagine putting it into a deck when Ambitious Necromancer is in the format. I think Necromancer probably just does all the things that you want Oceanographer to be doing faster and better. Oceanographer obviously has some applications over that. It's a better attacker. I mean, not much. It's a 1/1. It can get back things that don't cost
Three or
that
less.
cost 4 or more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require deck building constraints. But I think that in general, this is less appealing to me than that card, and I'm not interested in putting this into a deck because I just don't want to figure out what shell that is that leverages this better than the Necromancer.
So one angle of attack I thought with this card that you can't get with Necromancer comes from the what if a creature's expensive. And if you pair this with cyclers, ideally cyclers that do something when you cycle them, or other expensive creatures with a discard effect, this becomes a lot more appealing. I don't know off the top of my head if we have any of those particularly good in the format. Like, I don't think you want to do this with just something that cycles, because then it's just it's drawing a card every other turn. It's like, yeah, that's not that great. Like, it's fine, but it's not actively great. And I think you kind of need your cards to be actively great if you want to be fairly competitive here. Obviously, people disagree with me, and some people get fairly far doing that. But I think if you want to give yourself the best chances to succeed, you should play good cards. And I'm pretty convinced that Oceanographer is not a good card yet. But if we ever printed like a Shark Typhoon like card on a creature, I think this card becomes much more exciting and scarier.
That's true. And one card that it can get back that the Necromancer can't is Gloomtide Whelk.
Okay, now we're back.
We're there. We're in.
Now we have a new premium 1-mana removal spell. Move over to Stolen Secret. It's time to pay up. So 1 black sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an online card in it. And then there's a lot of words, but basically, if they get to choose what card to discard, if they discard the same card that you, if they discard any card but the one you chose, you get a treasure. So the threat there is, it's either a Thoughtseize that doesn't lose you life, or a Raven's Crime that accelerates you. So you put your opponent in a squeeze where, if you can threaten to turn to a villainy off of this, they're encouraged to discard the card you chose. The main issue I have with this is just it's very dependent on what level your opponent is operating on. Because if your opponent isn't like looking at your deck list, they might just say, "Yeah, whatever, take it," and you're like, "Oh, well, I mean, I guess I have a turn 2 ability or turn 2 Lord Rickard Dawson or whatever," but it's kind of awkward because I didn't get the card I wanted, and now I have to answer that. I think you're definitely in a bad spot if you look at their hand, and their hand has like an answer to your threat, because then it's like, okay, well, I guess I make them discard that because otherwise they would just answer my threat. Um, I don't know. I'm not gonna say I'm low on this card, but I just like I'm working out in my head like when it is good, and I think you need to build your deck with a lot of really powerful 3-drops that can run away with the game. And I think typically in that circumstance, I would rather just be running Mana Dorks. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that this card does one thing very well that I think is something we should actively encourage in MSEM, which is that it's a discard card, a discard spell that your opponent feels good when it gets cast. Like, not feels good, but doesn't feel just actively miserable. It leads to interesting decisions. And, usually you get Thoughtseize and you're just like, well, shit, man. That's the game. I hate myself. I hate black. I hate discard spells. My life is ruined. But when you get pay up cast against you, it leads to interesting decisions. It leads to interesting lines. I think it plays really well. I've played against it a couple of times, and the treasure has felt powerful for them to get Sometimes it was just Thoughtseize that didn't lose life, which is great. I agree that it requires your deck to be built in a way that you can leverage the treasure, and it felt like the decks that I played against so far couldn't. So it was pretty easy to just say, all right, I'll discard my worst card, and you can do whatever you want with that extra mana. It doesn't really matter to me. But I think that this has a really interesting play patterns, and I think that it could, in some situations, serve as the best discard spell choice. You just have to really care about the treasure.
Yeah, the way that it's I've seen it play so far reminds me of what's that one card from Ankret, Plea Bargain? Like where it feels like it's a powerful hand attack, but there's still lots of decision points that go into how it works, and like it feels like there's agency on both sides, and like I think that sort of play pattern is really exciting because it leads to situations where yeah, it doesn't lead to that Thoughtseize feels bad where it's like, well, this is just disproportionately in one person's favor. It's like, no, they you're definitely still encouraged to play the card. It's not like the benefit that your opponent gets from their choice isn't so much that the card isn't worth playing, but your opponent still feels like a level of agency over what happens in the end. So yeah,
Yeah, and in
just
general,
good vibes all around.
I am a very vocal opponent to 1 mana discard spells when you just get to basically dictate your opponent's hand and dictate the pace of the game. I think they can lead to they can increase the variance in games of Magic in ways I don't find fun. This doesn't. It creates a painful and difficult choice for your opponent to make, and it's very easy for your opponent to make bad choices. But at the end of the day, they're coming away from it probably having learned something and realizing, okay, I fucked that one up. Time to do better next time.
Yeah, one other thing that I want to shout out to this card about is that I think it's exceptional in leagues. I don't think it's as good in GP play because your opponent knows exactly what you might do on turn 3, and you know exactly what your opponent might have in hand. So Stolen Secrets is a lot better in a situation where you have your opponent's deck list. But in leagues where you're in the dark, if you go turn 1, like swamp, pay up, your opponent has no idea what you might do on turn 2 with that treasure. Your opponent, and like you have no idea what's in your opponent's hand. So Stolen Secrets and just arbitrarily naming a card type could just lose you the game. So I think that in leagues and in casual fights, when you're in the dark, this discard spell goes up a lot in value.
I do agree, but I also think people overstate some of the risk associated with Stolen Secrets. In that I think it's really easy to actually just play decks where you know the right thing to pick because you know what your deck can answer and you know what your hand can answer and what your hand loses to. I don't know. I generally agree with the point. I just think that um, people are a little bit too scared to register Stolen Secrets because they think it's like this incredibly difficult to use card. It's like, nah, just name the thing you die to. You'll be fine.
I also unrelated, but I really want to see someone juke someone out with this where they like mind game them where they deliberately pick the card that like they don't pick the card that they want them to discard, so their opponent is like, oh, okay, wait, maybe they have an answer to this threat, so instead I'll discard this other card, and it's like, actually I wanted you to discard that card, so I mind gamed you to discarding the card I wanted, and I got a treasure. Take that. When that happens, I will
And
be
this is
popping off in the commentator's booth, 100%.
so true. I mean, that's why you should never, like, basically never think about the information your opponent is giving you. Just try to derive all the information from what you have, which sounds like bad advice, but, like, it helps you not fuck yourself over. Big fan of not fucking yourself over.
Okay. So next up we have Salvage Titan. So you may sacrifice 3 artifacts rather than pay its spell's mana cost, and you can also return to your hand by exiling 3 artifact cards from your graveyard. Yeah, I think the free cast on this is I feel like you can probably do absurd stuff with it, and that's the reason to be playing this card.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So like really cheap artifacts plus talent pool, I think is the fastest.
I mean, talent
That's
pool is kind of
idea.
like I feel like talent pool is like a little win more. It's like, you can why not just take your 6/4 on like turn whatever and just call it a day.
So, in general, the thing that's kind of one thing I love about this card is it is a canon reprint from Shards of Alara. It also was part of a Whoops All Spells kill in Modern,
Oh
where
yeah.
you do the combo thing. Narcomoebas recur Sword of the Meek. You sacrifice Swords of the Meek to play Salvage Titans, which recur, and then you just like recur Vengevines and kill your opponent, something like that. I don't remember the exact kill, but it was suitably stupid and over the top. So that's always exciting. I think this sort of card being reprinted is, a very clever move on Dodger's end. But I am a little bit. I think this card has a lot of very powerful potential applications. And it's just a question of finding a shell that it doesn't suck in. So once people do that, I think this card's going to start seeming kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, this is a card that you never want to cast for its mana cost. If you spend 4 black on Salvage Titan, you feel like you've lost the game. I think that it really does have some interesting applications, especially with stuff like Warded Tome in the format, which is just 1 mana artifact replaces itself, can fuel Salvage Titan, can fuel it from the graveyard, does a lot of interesting things. We've got a ton of artifacts that provide incremental value, and then you can just pitch to the Titan. There's one in this set that's like Dawson's Loot or something that mills 2, and then you draw a card for 1 mana. Another easy one to pitch to Salvage Titan. I also think that it dodges a lot of removal in an interesting way. It can't be Pith Wilted. It will likely not fight it to Event Horizon, especially if you're exiling 3 artifacts or sacrificing 3 artifacts to cast it. And those are the 2 biggest removal spells that I've seen being played recently.
It's also invincible to the Containment Orb or whatever it's called, Ostracizer's Orb, because it's an artifact.
And it has 4 toughness, so it doesn't die to Roggers or Scorch or what have you.
It's very durable.
It is very durable. I think that you really need to be casting it turn 2 or turn 3 to make it powerful, because even turn 4 sacrifice 3 permanents to play a 6/4 is not that exciting. But
give me my turn one Plains Rail Line, turn self-replication, turn 2 Salvage Titan, please.
Well, I mean, if you do that, you can just do that turn 1.
Give me my turn 1 Salvage Titan. I take it all back.
The one thing I will say that is a risk people need to be aware of is going all in on the Salvage Titan is not actually that good, because Salvage Titan is just a 6/4. Like, if you produce turn 1 6/4, but you spent 3 cards to do it, and your opponent has Exeunt, you lose the game. That's over.
Yeah, I think that in fact what should happen is it should be buffed to.
Well, you can't buff it; it's a cannon card.
Yeah, but like just change it to not be a reprint. Make it a 7/4, so that way it kills in 3 hits.
Oh, so true. I do.
What about?
Oh, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, what about if on turn 4 you cast Dragon Gate and then sacrifice 3 artifacts to cast Salvage Titan?
I was going to point out that this is a free sacrifice outlet, and towards the end of the Torment Land era, that's one of the things we saw people starting to mess with them as is, how can I take advantage of having a free sack outlet? So that's pretty exciting, I think, finding some way to do that. The fact that it can also provide card advantage via turning artifacts in your graveyard into cards in hand. Like, just imagine repeatedly looting this away. Obviously not the most powerful use of it, but it is a powerful use of it. I don't know. I think there's a lot of weird things you can do with this card, and I'm excited to see the Bruce people come up with it. But we also probably need to start hurrying up in terms of the fact that we're an hour and a half in, and we're through 3 colors.
I literally think that's because like black and blue are some of the densest colors so far. So.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, so we'll speed it up. We have Snuff Out the Light, which is another 2 mana removal spell, sorcery speed. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. Exiling it as well is quite good, again, because we're seeing all of these cards which have powerful grave synergy. Being able to exile them as part of your removal is just icing on the cake. And even if you don't have the required number of cards in graveyard to really make it useful in the current board state, it has cycling black. So despite being sorcery speed and requiring like some investment to actually work as removal, the upside is like there's enough upside that like it's still a reasonable contender when thinking about deck building.
Yeah, cycling removal spells always are more powerful than they look, because when you can't use them or you don't want them, they just turn into something else. With that said, I just, we have so many powerful removal spells that I would want something more unconditional, usually, I think. But it's
or
possible
something
there are
that's
decks where that's not
instant
true.
speed. Being sorcery speed here does hurt it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty low on this card in general. It requires too much setup. It's 2 mana when I'd rather be killing things for 1. It's a sorcery when I'd rather be killing things at instant speed. You can cycle it, but it's not. I just don't think this card is that good.
All right, so let's move on to Trench Bottom Mariners and finish up black. Trench Bottom Mariners is a 3-mana 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you lose 3 life, mill 3 cards, and create a treasure token. When it attacks, you can cast a permanent card from your graveyard by sacrificing another artifact in addition to paying its costs. So you can sacrifice the treasure token, which is the intended use, and very quickly kind of start generating value, especially if the permanent card you cast is an artifact, like Doss's Loot, that mills over another thing. Like, yeah, you can go hey wild. But it's also a 3-mana 3/3 that loses you 3 life on ETB and has to repeatedly attack to generate value, so I'm a little bit sus on it.
Yeah, the 3 life does. Like, if you get this Rogars or something after you play it, like, you just lose to aggro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of casting this card, and it's incredibly fun. I think that there are some, you might be able to build some sort of stacks deck that just tries to gut both players' resources and then rebuild with the Trench Bottom Mariners. It's a super exciting card to get to actually attack with. It's an interesting play pattern. I don't think it's very good, but it's definitely fun. So I would try it in a league and then not register it for the GP.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable place to be.
I think that's it for black.
I believe so.
We're finally getting to red. Woo! And starting off with kind of a banger, Advent from Above. So this asks the age-old question of, what if I wanted my tormenting voice to also come with a lightning bolt attached? So it's sorcery speed. You discard a card as an additional cost. It deals 3 damage to any target, but you also get to impulse draw the top 2 cards of your library as long as you attack with an artifact creature that turn. Obviously, a deck building restriction, but if you're putting this card in your deck, you're aware of it, and you're probably playing enough artifact creatures that this is actually just the nuts. So, also being sorcery speed is still a downside, but still, what a powerful upside if everything comes together.
I think this card is substantially helped by the fact that it entered the format at the same time as Fiery Temper, because I think Fiery Temper with this feels amazing. Probably not as good as the Kaleidoscope discard a card to cast it something lightning, but
Distant Thunder,
thank you. But still fairly exciting in the grand scheme of things. I'd be a little bit curious to see the things you can get up to with this card, but I think if powers, there's not a lot of hidden things going on here. If this is good, you know exactly when it's good, why it's good, etc.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hit up Calamari Dragon. Who wants to talk about Calamari Dragon?
I will bravely talk about Calamari Dragon. So, basically, so I'm assuming that they don't have Cycling 0 if you haven't discarded. Do they have Cycling 0?
They do have Cycling 0.
They do.
Okay. So it's
but
basically
that just means, but then once you discard one of them to cycle, all the other ones go up to Cycling 1.
So it's basically just like you get 1 free cycle per turn, and then each of the subsequent ones it just ticks up, which is a very cool ability. And then you just get a bunch of value. I mean, I think the problem is it's 5 mana. Is just the reality of it. But maybe there's some dumb combo deck with this. But I think this is just one of those things where we highlight it because that first ability is just damn cool. Is it just a damn cool piece of rules text? You know what I mean? Is that just me?
I mean, the other thing that I think is very notable about this card is It's effectively a 5/5 the turn it comes down, because you play it, discard a card, move to your end step, get a 1/1. On their turn, your cards don't have cycling, which is unfortunate. This card having cycling itself means you can set it up for really easy reanimations if you want to, if that's what you're into. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this card has almost no MSEM applications, but it's very cool, and I won't fault people for trying.
Yeah, I'm kind of there. Okay, so let's talk about circling predators.
Mm-hmm. So
circling predators is a instant speed board wipe with cycling. That's a really magical number of things to come together. It's less good as a board wipe as Shell Drain's Rage, both because it doesn't have the 2-mana mode, and also it only does 2 damage at its base case. But if you have a card with cycling in the graveyard, it gets up to 3 damage. So if you've cycled away a dual land, such as one of the core duels that have cycling, this gets more interesting. I don't know. I'm lower on this card than a lot of people, but I know people who, when they saw this card, they were like, "Whoa, this seems powerful." But I think I've cast just too many Shell Drain's Rages in my time in MSEM to be particularly excited about circling predators.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, no, I take part of that back. If you do think you'll reliably have a cycling card in your graveyard when you cast this, I think this is better in the matchups where your opponent will sometimes produce a board of 3/3s that you need to answer then, but most of the time won't. The age-old question of, do I board in Shell Drain's Rage versus control decks with Rock Roll as finishers? Because you really don't want to draw Shell Drain's Rage when they're just killing you with Planeswalker card advantage, but you really need to have it the instant they, go for a board full of 3/3s. So I think Circling Predators excels there in circumstances where you will want it only some of the time. I think that's a really weird sideboard hedge, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this does a couple of interesting things. It's, I think, better main board than Shell Drain's Rage is, just in the dark, because it can cycle away, and there's a lot of creatureless control matchups you're going to run into. It also doesn't max out at 3. It can get up to 4 or 5 if you have a couple of other cycling stuff like lands or another circling predators in your graveyard, which means it does kill Gloomtide Whelks, which is very big in this format.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And in general, I haven't been thrilled with the 2-mana variant of Shell Drain's Rage these days. There's not a lot of 1 toughness stuff that I feel like I'm winning the game if I sweep it away. I'm more worried about,
it's very nice against
the 2 and 3
though,
stuff.
I will say.
That's true.
Like, they're playing against ramp, and then they go dork into turn 2, what do you call it, Sabne's Autumn and other dork, and you just kill 2 of their dorks, and they're like, well, there goes my big turn 3 6-drop.
That's true, but there's enough beefy stuff in the burn decks and in the counters decks that I'd want to be able to hit with. That I'd hit with Shell Drain's Rage anyway, but that don't make the first half of that look particularly exciting. So I think this has applications, even if it's not, a strict upgrade in any way to Shell Drain's Rage.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. All right, let's talk about. Sorry, I need to scroll down a lot.
Spear Hunter.
Oh.
2/1. And it has a simple pinger ability if you control 3 or more artifacts. I think this is like... You go ahead.
Or Jackal-Pup.
This has so many goddamn Savannah Lions with really noticeable upsides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you want this, you're gonna be very aware. But it's like basically any red artifact aggro deck. I think this is at the very least a good sideboard card, because it's an aggressive creature that if you're against other decks with small creatures, it just shows up just as, cool, that's dead, that's dead, that's dead. But if someone...
Where are you getting the 3 or more artifacts, though? Unless you're specifically an artifact aggro list.
Right, I'm saying in an artifact aggro deck. In a deck where you're trying to do Devise Companion stuff. This card is great either in the main deck or in the sideboard. One slight risk is, I think, something that people have been struggling with, especially recently in this format, is we're starting to hit critical mass of artifact support cards that aren't artifacts. So, and all of them need artifacts to kick them off. So I think one thing that you need to be wary of when you're looking at this is keeping your artifact count high. I don't think you can just run this in decks that produce a couple treasures here and there.
Yeah, I think, and definitely Elmare gives us a lot of artifact creatures to work with in that sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, this card gives me whiplash because every time I look at it, I'm just like, okay, 1 mana, 2/1. That's a good baseline. And it has upside. It has an ability. Let me read the ability. This ability seems not that good. I don't think this card's very good. Wait, it's a 1 mana, 2/1.
Yeah,
I've been bouncing back and forth on it this entire time. Someone else is going to have to show me whether or not it's good, but as a 1 mana, 2/1, how bad can it really be, right?
Right. It definitely suffers a lot from additive distraction, where
Mhm.
you look and you think, "Oh, I'm not playing artifacts. I shouldn't run this card." It's like, well, I mean, okay, how not playing artifacts are you? Like, if you're just a little bit not playing artifacts, you probably should be running this card. I don't know.
If you already want a 1 mana, 2/1.
exactly. And like I guess we have enough 1 mana 2/1s in red that you don't need this. Like, just run Suitor of the Seas, just run Banished Companion, Avatar Besought, whatever. But like, if you have any amount, like, I don't know, bird spell that makes a treasure or investigates or whatever, like, then I would start staring at this more and more. The
Yeah.
more of those you have. It looks like the next card that we have is the Current Surfer. So Current Surfer is a 1 mana 1/1. And then it also has whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's kind of a Miracle Grow style threat, which at 1 mana is pretty nice. And then also has 1 red, discard your hand, sacrifice it, draw X cards where X is its power at the beginning of next end step, discard your hand. So it's kind of similar to Bomat Courier, except it trades haste for just a better first ability. I think that makes it much better than Bomat Courier.
Also, like the fact that that sacrifice works with a pump spell. I want a giant growth this and then sack it so bad.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the cards are temporary makes me a little bit like, on that, but I don't know. It's a cool effect. Like, I think this card is exciting. I'm just a little bit. I'm not sure what its applications look like. I think is the way I would put it.
I mean, just if you're kind of flooding out, you can easily just be like, I'll sack this and then hope to draw into a few burn spells post combat. Okay, I don't think that's the worst idea.
I don't, although I'm always a little bit wary of I'll just do this and hope to draw into something. Like, just inherently, I'm a little bit like,
Because we've all played enough games where we're just like, let's just try it, and then missed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, this hand's fine as long as I draw a single land in my top 6 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this card is obscene if you're drawing multiple cards each turn, and I think it's powerful if you do it once or twice and then never again. And so it's definitely playable, especially because the last ability can get you so much value potentially. But I don't think that just like generic burn really wants this.
I'd agree with that. I think you need to be in a deck for this card before you're excited to run it.
Let's talk about Fabulous Find.
Oh man, this is a card which like it's.
This card makes me so nervous as a member of the council.
Yeah. Okay. So I basically played this card in Tumbled MTG actually because there is literally this, except it was a restricted card.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it was basically like one of the best cards in the blue-red storm deck that existed there because it was basically like, yeah, you know what? I'll find like the like I'm going to find some action here, and it being only 1 mana makes it like so much more flexible and worth it. It was basically like I believe that one was 7 cards, and I think this was originally 7 cards as well, but
correct.
Yeah, like just that amount of digging for such a cheap cost was just insane. And like
Yeah,
I feel like this is just similarly just oinkers kaboinkers.
Yeah, turns out a lot of those cantrip style effects, like, the more cards you look, the more powerful they are. It's just really simple, like, direct, like, you can draw that line. Looking at 5 cards is insane. Your ability to assemble 2-card combos from looking at that is really terrifying.
And the main thing holding it back is the fact that, you can't set it up in advance. You can't say, okay, well, I'm going to cast a bunch of cantrips, I'm going to sculpt a hand, and then I'm going to go. You have to be prepared to go that turn, because that's how Fabulous Find works. You only get the card for that turn. But with all of those caveats said, I don't know, this card makes some decks that shouldn't be as consistent way more consistent in a way that I think is potentially very, very worrisome.
Yeah, it seems dangerous and powerful, but not clearly to a point that's detrimental to the format.
Yep, exactly.
I'm sure someone will prove me wrong there. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why we're hedging our bets and putting a lot of yets and hypotheticals here.
Exactly.
All right. So the next card we have is Jetscape, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. 2 mana for a 2/1 haste enchantment creature enters battlefield. If you draw 2 or more cards this turn, it deals 2 damage to any target, cycling 1 red. This card is just kind of a premium card in a lot of different ways. It's a payoff for drawing a second card a turn, which is really easy to do. If you do that, it's potentially a kind of mini Chupacabra. The base case is also a 2/1 with haste, which that's probably fine in an aggressive deck. It being an enchantment creature makes it easier to enable kind of more aggressive Concord strategies. You could do a Naya Concord deck with this, I imagine.
Yeah.
And the fail case is, of course, again, cycling. Slapping 1 mana cycling onto cards really helps them. Because just in the circumstance of where this isn't what you need, you just need something else, you have something else.
It kind of reminds me a bit of a Viashino Pyromancer from a few standards back. That ability to come down and instantly dome something, even if it didn't have the haste, that flexibility.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that made Viashino Pyromancer fine is the fact that it could only go face. The fact that this can sometimes pick up a kill on a creature is
Or Planeswalker.
Yeah, well, I mean, Viashino Pyromancer could pick up kills on Planeswalkers as well, but yeah, very, very powerful effect.
That's true. It could, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. I also want to give a quick shout out to Dodger. This is another red card with just aggressively blue art. Love the cognitive dissonance there. Very, very happy about it. And the card is
a red effect, right? Red cares about drawing cards.
That is true. Yeah, the card is clearly powerful on a lot of different axes. Is it MSEM powerful? I'm not sure, but it's certainly one that is worth trying to build around.
Yeah, it's the sort of card where if someone showed up to an MSEM GP with it, I wouldn't be surprised. I would probably check, oh, did you playtest this in a league game I didn't see? And they would say, no, I just thought it was cool, and I would get a little bit more concerned. But in terms of just raw effect and value, I think its power level is probably almost there. So the next card is actually a big breakout card this GP. We have Oil Driller, which currently has something like 10-ish match plays and only 2 losses. So that's pretty hype. Oil Driller is a mini Ball Lightning, 3 mana, 4/3 trample haste. Enters the battlefield, salvage 2 cards at random, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Oil Driller. So what that kind of looks like is it's a 3 mana, it's an aggressive creature, but it also can help you cycle some value back. If it picks up 2 lands, you're in a bad spot. So you don't want to run this index heavily on fetch lands, which means you can't run this in very multicolored decks. But in red-black or blue-red or whatever, this card's probably there. It didn't seem that good in Marina's burn deck, but it is one of the central cards in Dodger's Unearth deck, so, at least there's a clear pet synergy there. I'm not sure, though. It's very much not my sort of card. I think the body's a little bit too small to be, insanely competitive, but it is a card that negates the weakness of Ball Lightning in a really exciting way.
Yeah, I think Marina's deck just has too many copies of it. I think drawing the second copy of Oil Driller in Burn feels horrible because you don't really want to have to cast multiple 3-drops in a game of Burn.
Yeah.
But I think it's very cool. It has very powerful angles. I've played a little with it. I've played a lot against it. It's always felt like it had strong lines, but wasn't dominating the game. And I love cards like that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a card that's about little edges.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Plasma Blader. Red for a 1/1 enchantment creature Trilobite Knight. I want to give that type line a shout out.
Yeah, this set
First strike
is kind of
haste.
really killing it with the
Yeah.
cap lines.
First strike haste grows whenever you cast an enchantment, instant, or sorcery spell, and 4 mana sack it. It deals damage to something equal to its power. So like the floor of this is 2 mana, 1/1 first strike haste. You would not run that in constructed. It's not the worst as immediate board impact, but you would not play that in constructed. Permanently growing upon casting instant or sorceries is very exciting. Sprite Dragon is a very powerful card. This, it doesn't grow off of planeswalkers or artifacts, but it does grow off of enchantment creatures, so that's kind of sweet. And then it also gives you this reach component, where if for whatever reason it can't swing in, despite the fact that it's first strike, you can pop it and deal direct damage, or you can hit your opponent and then pop it afterwards, give it kind of one turn of double strike. Or you can use to blow up a creature or planeswalker that you couldn't hit for whatever reason. Like, there's a lot of leverage you can take out of this card, and I think the only issue with it is the fact that it's not really where burn decks want to be right now, but maybe they should be. So I think it's worth exploring more than we've seen it explored so far.
Yeah, I agree. I think the card's cool. I think it's powerful, but not in a way that obviously fits into an MCM deck. It also, I think, is the most Yu-Gi-Oh sounding name in this entire set.
Ooh, strong agree.
I did not think of that until you mentioned it, but yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh does like their plasmas.
And it loves its bladers.
Busta Blader.
Nah, it's a cool card. I look forward to losing to this.
Yeah, like, it does so much, and I think that the main thing is just, like, I feel like when building this, the main thing is just not to get, like, too, like, drawn in by any single part of it, and just be like, yeah, it's a good card. As long as I have some things that, like, enable this, I'll probably be alright. And if I have a need for 2-drops, to a 2-drop aggressive creature, let's run it and see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree in terms of if you're running this card, you shouldn't use that as an excuse to put in bad enchantments into your deck.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep playing the cards you want to play, and trust that this will still show up.
Yep. Okay, next up is 20,000 Leagues. 1 red for an enchantment. It allows you to loot for 1 and a red. And for a single red, you can put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield and give it haste, but only if there are, as the card name says, 20 or more cards in your graveyard. So basically, like, a very conditional sneak attack that can still fuel itself. I don't know, this card seems like a little bit too hard to enable for it to be a reliable constructed piece, but it's just a very cool card, TM, so I think I don't mind just showcasing it here.
Yeah, I'm on
the same page. Like, I think you can't use this as your cheat engine. I think where this card is good is in a deck that's something like the old modern Through the Breach control decks, where you play this in the early game, you occasionally use this, like, you hold mana up and you occasionally filter things, or you're casting other looting spells or whatever, and then eventually you pop off a Embercool. But the issue is, it requires so much to be going right to be the win con that you need it to be. And you just, in MSM, you can't just like stick an enchantment on the battlefield and sit around and just be like, yeah, when I need this to win the game, it'll be fine. Like, people are going to kill that. So there's a lot of matchups where you can't afford to play this early, and if you can't afford to play this early, it's really not good enough.
One thing that I think is notable is that it is 1 mana, so it's not that bad if you play it for 1 and then they pith wilt it and you're just like, all right, you know what? Like, we traded 1 for 1, you traded down in mana value. I have more 20,000 Leagues in my deck somewhere, and I'm playing the long game, so I'll find them. it's not like you play your sneak attack on turn 4 and then it gets blown up and you're just like, well, that was miserable.
That's a good point. The other thing is, if you do have the condition, it is the cheapest through the breach effect we have by a very large amount.
Yes.
I red. And which means it's much easier to play it and protect it.
True.
Yeah, this is a card that I'm going to put in like 30 different decks and then never finish any of them because I can't figure out how to get so many cards into your graveyard. But it's very cool, and when I lose
Resigned
to
to
it in
Madness.
League, I'll be pretty happy about it.
Resigned to Madness puts 20 cards in your graveyard.
For the next 4 days, yeah.
No, you just get your opponent to cast the Resigned to Madness then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just mind control them. But we mentioned we have all those mind controls. So those work on players too, right? Obviously. Okay.
I think there might be some ethical limitations there, but you can try.
Yeah, we're gonna cancel Emperor's Eye. Watch out.
All right, so next card we have is our first green card. So let's look at Bank Skimmer. So Bank Skimmer is green 2 for a 1/1 trample. That is not an impressive stat line. However, it's an Aura Shaper. So when it enters the battlefield, you get to attach a Aura token to one of your creatures that gives enchanted creature +X/+X, where X is converted mana cost. So this is secretly a 4-mana 5/5. I think this is not as good as Mossy Companion. It's better than Mossy Companion if you have other 4-drops lying around, so it can give them haste effectively, or so 4th power has haste. But I never want to put this enchantment on anything other than this. I think this is usually going to be the expensive thing on the table.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit sus there, especially because if I don't put the enchantment on something else, this was effectively an aura, because a 1/1 trample is basically useless.
Yeah, and it is so vulnerable to removal while that ability is on the stack. If they just have any a shock thing, they can chill it in response. And
I do think it's fun with something like Sinew Colossus, or I don't know, other things that are expensive but get cheaper for the cards in your graveyard.
Gloomtide Whelk.
Yeah, I mean, pressure cards are obviously the synergy here. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are some games where you're going to play this after playing a Scion, and then your Scion's going to beat your opponent for 10, and you're going to win. But I don't think Bank Skimmer is the card winning you the game in that case.
Yeah. I think the one other thing to kind of keep in mind on that whole front is looking at it as if there are things that synergize with small creatures entering the battlefield, or things that are small in your graveyard, that might be exciting to utilize.
Not that we ever let anything get through if it's keying off of power, but
yeah, we generally try not to do that. But I mean, I don't think a tutor for something with power 2 or less. I don't think an Imperial Recruiter would be unable to see play in this format, or sorry, unable to see existence in this format. All right.
Yeah, wait. Before we go on, has anyone mentioned what is that crazy? There's that. It's the 9-mana card from Survive the Night that gets cheaper.
Oh. Yeah, I know the one we're talking about. Ominous Heart.
Yeah.
And it has menace, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think I don't think it'll be good, but if you really want to leverage Bank Skimmer for maximum bang for buck value, I think that's that's a synergy to go for.
I mean, it is literally a buck.
Hey, well now.
Nice. One last thing I want to mention about this card is that unfortunately on this one the turtle is not the creature. It's once again the dude on the back.
Aw,
but,
man.
Yeah, it's pretty disappointing because this turtle's really majestic, but it's just this stupid merfolk on its back that's the actual creature. So if you register this, I'll shame you for it because of that.
So true.
All right, move on to bigger fish.
I really think you could have made a joke about how we have bigger fish to fry than talking about Bank Skimmer, but okay. So this is 5 mana sorcery. You have to sacrifice a creature, and then it doubles that creature's CMC in terms of tutoring. So it's better than what lurks beyond for anything that isn't a 1-drop. Notably, 5 mana is a lot, but it has pressure 3. So I feel like what you want to be sacrificing with this is you want to be sacrificing something that's 3 or 4 mana. 3 mana is kind of sus because then you're spending 3 mana plus 5 mana to cheat out a 6-drop.
Like it's not the worst, but it's not great. But once you start getting to like, you're sacrificing a 4-drop or you're casting this for a pressure cost, then we start actually meaningfully cheating on mana.
Well, I would say it's roughly equivalent to pod chaining up to that 6-drop in terms of the total mana cost to you.
That's true, and I mean, what makes What Lurks Beyond good isn't the mana efficiency it saves. Like, anytime someone's like, oh man, this card's busted, you produced a 6-drop on turn 3, it's like, did you see how much mana I spent to get a 6-drop on turn 3? I would have been better off just ramping if I actually cared about it. The thing that makes What Lurks Beyond so strong is it also creates all these little moments of incremental value along the way. Whereas
Absolutely.
Bigger Fish
And like,
doesn't really do that. It's kind of just a one and done. Like, this
it's
this
so
is a
easy
dedicated
to
cheat
tutor.
card.
Like, if this was, yeah, the fact that this isn't tutorable by like the ancestral councils, I guess you can aspirant it, but yeah, it's. Ugh.
I think it might have some value as like a one of or a two of in the actual Podlight decks. Just because sometimes you'll be able to, I mean, those generally will fill up their graveyards mildly quickly. And being able to pressure this to sacrifice your stupid 1/1 for a 6-drop or, a Scion is a pretty powerful line. I think this is also a card that we've seen a lot of pressure cards that we just say, hey, once you get to pressure, this card's great. I expect at some point someone will figure out what the best tuned pressure engine is. And once we figure out what the best engine for getting reliable pressure is, I think this card goes up in value because for 3 mana, turning some stupid 3-drop into a 6-drop is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. What's next? Oh yeah, this one.
Yeah, so let's talk about
So,
Correlite Lifebloom.
yeah, who wants to sell me on this card?
I don't, but I'll tell you what the card is.
Cool.
I mean, I could if you'd like, because I think this is actually a pretty good one.
Go ahead,
Great.
Kevin.
Sell me on it.
Well, okay, so for something, like a blue-green flash list, this is essentially a 2-mana counterspell creature. Like, and it can be played proactively or reactively. The hexproof sticks around. I do think, yeah, this is a card where if you're doing any kind of flash stuff, like you might be holding up mana, you can just play this as a 2/2 hexproof proactively or reactively to defend a key creature like a Veilborn Meddler or a Champion of the Fae. Like, I do think what with all of that, it does so much for such little mana that it just fits in very nicely.
So, I think a lot of my success with Rug Flash this GP is coming from the fact that I'm not running cards like Corelight Lifebloom. I'm not running cards like Sanchin. I'm really just sticking as low to the ground as possible, and I'm requiring as few things to go right as possible for my cards to be good. Corelight Lifebloom, like we're talking about, like, oh, it's a 2-drop that can counter some spells. It's like, yeah, so we run 4 copies of Veilborn Meddler. Do we need copies 5, 6? Like, I'm not sure on that one. And I think that the base case of this, if you don't get much value out of it, if it's just a flash, like, a Ashcoat Bear that has hexproof, I don't think that's that great. I think it's bad unless you're casting in a response to removal spell, and that removal spell needs to target, and they need to not have like another removal spell for the aura. And there's just so many little things that need to go right for this card to be as good as you want it to be. And I think if it's anything less than that, I think it's not good.
Fair.
I know that the counters decks have been running copies of Blossoming Defense. I don't know if they can afford to leave up a second mana, but having the hexproof stick around on your, like 8/9 creature with trample does mean that your opponent can't untap and try to Event Horizon it again, which could add an angle of resilience against some of the more targeted removal decks. Plus, a flash 2/2 body is better against Exhumed than anything else to sacrifice this.
Mm-hmm.
True.
I'm not sold on it. I think it doesn't do it does a lot, but none of it is enough.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Is if we calculated cards based on how many little neat synergies or use cases they might have, this card would be a lot better than I'm giving it credit for. But we don't. We calculate it based on like realistic use cases, and this card does not have good enough realistic use cases.
Agreed.
Let's talk about Denithra Muck Bruiser. So for 1 and a green, it is a 2/3. It taxes your opponent's spells that target it by 2. And then it also gets +X, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard, -7.
Quick
So
check. That X can't be negative, right? Like
yeah. So that was a rules change that happened around Amonkhet, where they said if X is negative, it's 0 instead, which made a lot of people that were playing really stupid Death Shadow decks with Phyrexian Unlife very sad, and made anyone who ever wanted to play the green card in the Eternal Cycle that gave something +X until end turn very happy, because otherwise you could just Grasp of Darkness in response and then get them to kill their own creature. Not a good time. Or I mean, kind of a good time, but not
Yeah, I remember watching a Wild Beastmaster, Bearmaster, which is the one
it's
that gives.
Beastmaster and gets Hydroblasted, or not Hydroblasted, like Hydro Pumped. It's the Return to Ravnica -5/-0 until end of turn overload card.
Mm-hmm. I remember watching one get Morbid Tragic slipped.
Oh Jesus, that also does it.
Everything -12, -12.
It could come up in limited, which I'm shocked they didn't change it back then. Where it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this just generic blue combat trick actually is a one-sided board wipe if my opponent attacks with their creature.
Ugh.
Not good. Anyway, Denithra is fine. It's showing up decently well this GP. I'm not excited about it because I think the fact that it scales with cards in your graveyard means that a lot of the decks that traditionally are just like you need to hit 7 cards before you need to hit 8 cards before it's anything. And you need to realistically start hitting 10 cards before it starts becoming kind of insane. I think a 2-mana 2/3 with mild defensive ability isn't good enough in this format, so you need to be relying on the second ability. I think it's a pale imitation of a Tarmogoyf, and I think a lot of people are kind of playing it as if it was Tarmogoyf, and I think that's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Because this is never going to be a 5/6 on turn 3 like Goyf can be.
Yeah.
It is good in the sense that it's harder to interact with than a lot of the creatures in the same slot, and the longer the game goes, the better it grows. So I've seen one when it's like a 17-18 because the game's been going for 14 turns and your opponent's top decking. It feels exceptional, and it's not bad early. So I think there are 100% decks where this is a great creature and it's always going to feel good to have. But it's not a Tarmogoyf replacement. It's not just Goyf.
So let's talk about Drawn to the Light. Because MSEM didn't have any playable regrowth, so Drawn to the Light really fills a niche that we were totally missing. For people who don't really follow MSEM, we have a lot of really good regrowths. And I think Drawn to the Light is going to be like the 3rd best one, and I don't think that's a great spot to be in. But it's 4 mana for a regrowth that exiles itself, or you can pressure it for 1 green. So it's not good in the kind of early game regrowth scenarios that we see cards like Whisperwood Exploration being good against. And does fill up your grave, which makes it worse than Wealth of the Underbrush in a deck like Hunter's Hideout. But if you are playing a kind of deck that needs a regrowth and hits, 8 cards in the graveyard, being 1 mana versus 2 mana, because we do have Legends Remembered, which is a 2 mana regrowth, might be a very real thing. I can't imagine it, but maybe it's there.
I'm not buying it. I think this is just not good.
Yeah, I think there are very, very, very niche cases where the 1 mana versus the 1 mana ceiling versus the 2 mana consistency is worth it. I just think it's unlikely TM. Okay. Next up we have Glum Oarfish, Sad Boy.
Okay, so I put this on the list.
Oh, okay.
So it's
If-
1 mana for a 1/2 enchantment creature. When you cycle a card, you get to reveal cards from the top of your library. You get any of them that are permanent, or you get one of them that's a permanent, and the other one goes to the graveyard. Or top of your library. So it's kind of like also a mini surveil, and it can cycle. So the thing that I think is really interesting about this card is comparing it to something like Trail of Breadcrumbs, where Trail of Breadcrumbs being an enchantment I think is on average good for it, but not strictly. But otherwise it's basically the same trigger. Look at the top two, you get a permanent card, and the other one in Trail of Breadcrumbs case goes to the graveyard. In this one you actually get extra card selection out of it. This all happens before you draw a card off of the cycle, which I think makes the surveil part of it even more powerful. With that said, you need to have a lot of cycling cards for this to be good, and most of them need to be 1 mana. If you meet that circumstance, this card's insane. It's like Edgewall Innkeeper style, just ball out of control. But yeah,
Yeah, if we ever got like we're probably never gonna get a Street Wraith or anything like that, but if we did, this would be nuts.
Yeah, I agree. I think it has some really interesting applications. But someone's going to have to sell me on cycling.deck before I sign off on this being MSEM playable.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk about the second best Concord Planeswalker that came out in this patch. So we have Myrmidon, Coralite Exile. 2 green for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. +1, create a tapped colorless artifact token named Conch Shell that taps for 1 mana of any color, but only for permanent spells.
Oh,
-1.
yeah, note that it doesn't sacrifice the conch shell. The conch shell is just permanent ramp.
It's permanent ramp. Yep, that's a good point. It's effectively making lands, but they're artifacts, which is nice because, Planeswalker artifact, you have lands to play it. You're probably most of the way to Concord, especially because the -3, as we'll get to, makes enchantment creatures to 3/3 sharks. And the -1 is, I think, one of the weaker link abilities. It's look at the top X cards of your library, or X the number of card types amount of permanents you control, you get a permanent card from among them, and the rest into your graveyard. So a thing you might notice is that it looks X cards deep into your library, where X the number of permanent cards you control, or permanent types you have. It doesn't draw X cards, and I think that's the biggest weakness of this card, is when you look at it compared to Tamiyo. Myrmidon's a fine card, and the kind of modal nature of it's either a 4 mana 6/6 or a 4 mana ramp spell that threatens to make 6/6s, or it's this recurring value engine. Like, all those look kind of neat, but I think it lacks the raw card advantage of something like Tamiyo or even Helene Trant. And it's very synergy oriented, which I think is not where you want your Planeswalkers to be on average.
Yeah, the fact that it dies if you -3 it immediately is really sad. And I think it means that this card's just not exceptional. It does a lot of interesting things, and it feels like a very Volta Hearth style card in that it does a bunch of things and none of them are that good, but a lot of them provide a lot of synergy for other decks. So I wouldn't be surprised if people continue to play it.
Now that Volta Hearth is gone, maybe this can take the place of that in some shells.
Yeah, that's true. But it's no Tamiyo, that's for sure.
That's very true.
How much is?
Thank God. I think the things like the power of Tamiyo are good in, I think, smaller density.
All right. So now we're completing what I have deemed the pseudo cycle in Elmare of Jesus Christ, this is a push Savannah Lion. So we have Sea Drake Rider, which is green Savannah Lion with Concord 1 green. It becomes a 4/4 and must be blocked until end turn. And you can only do it once per turn, only on your turn. Yada yada yada. I looked at this card initially. I was like, that's why do I want to activate mana to activate it? And then again, I was like, but it's a Savannah Lion. Like, the base case of this is good enough. I don't need to care about that the activated ability costs mana or whatever. And the activated ability is kind of a removal spell. If your opponent has a creature with, power and toughness less than 4/4, this is just going to eat it. Unless they have a way to, tap the creature or something. So, I don't know. I think this card's just genuinely powerful. You just need it in a specific shell, and currently most of the green Concord decks are going super far over the top, so this doesn't really slot in.
Yeah, I agree. It's a card that I've looked at a lot and thought, hey, this has a good Concord payoff, but it this and Seismic Colossus don't go in the same deck. And
Yeah.
I'm always more prone to playing the 8-drop over the 1-drop. So someone else is going to have to build this one, but it's definitely a powerful effect. A 4/4 for 1 mana is nothing to scoff at, even if it costs a little mana each turn.
So Shambling Dreadwraith is a card that I both love and that speaks to me as a player, but also I'm pretty sure will just murder me at some point, and I can't really stop that. It's 6 mana for a Trample Hexproof, where the power and toughness equal the number of land cards you own on the battlefield in your graveyard. So, you have your 6 lands, you have your 3 fetch lands in the graveyard. This is 6 mana, 9/9 Hexproof Trample. That's insane. Except it also has Pressure 4. So if you've been self-milling, like you've been doing Hunter's Hideout stuff, you cast a single Wealth of the Underbrush. You can go like Wealth of the Underbrush on 2, Threat on 3, or like another fetch land. This on 4, and it's realistically going to be like a 6/6 Trample Hexproof for 4.
Yeah, I like how you said that you're going to die to this card, as though you aren't a #1 Exant fan waving the little triangle flag in the background. Like, I think, I hope more people play this, because then I think it creates an interesting dynamic with like, hey, we're getting increasingly good targeted removal, but this can like pull the pendulum back to some of our good edict-based removal and be like, yeah, should have been running Memento Mori, which I think Memento Mori's this entire set just makes Memento Mori's stock like skyrocket in general.
Yeah.
So.
It does.
Yeah, this is another card that I want to see the quote-unquote pressure engine for, but it's one that if you're not running black when this hits the battlefield, you just kind of shrug and click the concede button.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a solid. It's just a solid beater. Of course, it is not a Carnage Tyrant, so you can also still interact with it on the stack. So
True.
yeah. So next up we have Silt Lurker, which, the 3/2 for 2. We continue with our aggressive stat lines, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you get to mill 3 cards and then draw a card if your graveyard has 7 or more cards in it, which. Like you just go Oracle's Vision into this, and then turn 3, you mill 3, draw a card, and you have pressure online. Seems pretty not bad. And then if you draw this in the late game when you're needing a haymaker, it's just got cycling.
Yeah, and it's also a 3/2, like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this card feels very good.
Yeah, that's
2 mana 3/2s don't actually need that much text to be format relevant. Curving, aggro 1-drop into this into Lone Survivor probably kills someone. Cycling is a nice base case here. The fact that it draws you cards while it's murdering your opponent is really like scary. I don't know.
And like you only like, even if you're not self-milling yourself other than this, you basically only need 2 hits for it to start drawing cards, because you'll have thrown away a fetch land somewhere to get that 1 card.
Alright, so you guys want to hear something really funny?
Always.
Both this and Lone Survivor are scouts.
Huh.
Scout tribal TM? Does Wei have any dumb scout tribal cards?
No, but High Noon did. So we have a card called Scout Ahead, which is 1 green sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You can get a scout or land card from among them and put it into your hand.
That could be a kind of cool deck.
So yeah, I'm kind of into that conceptually. I don't know what other payoffs we have scout wise, but that's just like one that I know offhand. So yeah, some cool synergy there. Yeah, Sevid also makes scouts, but doesn't have any extra scout synergies. I don't know. I think like the base case of this card, like I think it's really easy to like look at this card and just think like, oh, these are the things I want to do with it. But really, just if you play this card, like the first hit probably doesn't draw you a card, but the second hit almost always will. So it's a 2 mana 3/2. That's good enough already, and it can potentially be an ongoing card advantage engine. In the matchups where it's bad for whatever reason, I don't know what those matchups are, you cycle it. Like, I don't know. I think this card is kind of stacked.
Cool. I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm. Because when I saw this card, I was like, hubba what? So.
Yeah.
And like, this is a set full of cards which make me go hubba what. So.
Yeah, I did not see this until this moment. I can't believe I overlooked it. Like,
I've already talked to Dodger about this. I think this set is very Unraveling-esque in terms of you can build around the cards, and when you do, they become very, very concerning. I think it's generally more thought out in terms of how things will break than Unraveling. Whereas what JN did when making Unraveling was thought, okay, do I have any way of breaking this card right now in MSEM? Looked through it very carefully. No. Currently, this card is a puzzle. At some point in time, people will figure it out. It's like, the issue is once we start figuring those cards out, a lot of them became unreasonable. But I don't think that'll ever be the case for most of these Elmare cards. They just go from, I don't know how to build around this to I know how to build around this, and dear God, is it terrifying. The next card we have is something that I am one of the most vocal critics of this card. I pushed for it to maybe not end up in MSEM because it is a card that I am very concerned about. And I think it will be fine in the grand scheme of things, but it's a very powerful effect, which is a canon reprint, Wilt. Wilt is 1 and a green for an instant destroy card artifact or enchantment, and has cycling 2, discard a card and draw a card. So the thing that I think people are missing when they look at Wilt, they're just like, it's just a naturalize with cycling. What's the big deal? Is Wilt shows up in legacy decks a fair bit because getting to play, well, at least it did before Astrolabe was banned. I'm not sure right now, but getting to play a naturalize that when you don't want naturalize is just any other card is really, really powerful. You get to say, cool, if my opponent brought in a Haymaker I need to answer, like a Sulfuric Vortex or Wartorb, I answer it. And if they didn't, I just, can find another thing. I think it's possible that MSEM just doesn't really need it in the same way because things like Pith Wilt. But in like blue-green, like red decks, for instance, I think most of the slower blue-green red decks should probably be playing a copy of Wilt or two, either in the main deck or sideboard. I think this is a card you can get away with main decking, and that's one thing that makes it very powerful.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, this is basically just downgraded Pithwalt because it has one less word in the name. So.
Oh, so true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to this other than what Pip said.
All right. Who wants to start us off with the very exciting multicolored card?
Yeah. So the first multicolored card we have is Anemothra's Reef Crown, which is a 4-mana 5/4 in red and green. It has cycling for a red and a green, so 2 mana cycling. And at the beginning of each end step, if you drew and or discarded 6 or more cards this turn, return Anemothra's Reef Crown from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this will reanimate if you've cast a Careful Study and then drawn another card, which is, I think, the main case that you're going to see. Cast a Careful Study, draw 2, discard 2. You've drawn 1 for turn, then you cycle a card, you have 6. Anemothra's comes back. It's also a 4-mana 5/4, which is not great, but like sometimes you just need to cast your cheaty face target, and it's not bad. I had this played against me. I put it on the top of my opponent's library 4 times, and each of the next 4 turns, it was discarded and then reanimated. So it definitely has a lot of staying power. It's not as obscene as a card like Vengevine, and it's legendary, which means that it doesn't come back in multiples. So I feel like it's an eminently fair version of the card that comes back for free from your graveyard, but is exceptionally powerful on turn 2, which is as easy, or like I said, as easy as 2 Careful Studies or a Careful Study in a cycle, and will beat you down pretty fast because it's got 5 power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any really degenerate things you can do with this, but I don't think so.
I mean, the fact it's legendary really stops the most broken use cases. I think the fact that it plays so well with the Yoga Firebird stuff is a really big point in its favor. One thing that I think is very easy to overlook is how trivial it is to recur, since it checks both combined draw and discard. So
draw for turn. If you cast a single Careful Study, you're at 5. So if you draw 1 extra card and cast a Careful Study, it's on the battlefield. And it comes back each end step, so that's kind of sick. I don't know. I think this card might be too powerful, but it's also just like it's just kind of a critical mass thing with like all the Miyuga Firebirds.
You don't know how much I wish that like. Can you imagine old wade through with this? Ooh, on God. So I get to discard a bunch of cards. Then for 7 mana, play a huge threat. Then I'll get back my Anamorphous at the end of turn. This can all be done as early as turn 2. GG. We're living in the worst timeline where that's not possible.
Not entirely sure I agree, but
One thing that we can agree on is that Collect Rotting Remains is a sick card. So you essentially get to tutor up a card with a creature with CMC 3 or less, put onto the battlefield. Obviously, for 4 mana, that's a little steep. We do have, in a similar vein, what is it called? Oh God.
Ayala's Concord.
Ayala's Concord, yeah. But that's any permanent. Where this does shine, though, is when it's a 2 mana, where it's a 2 mana for pressure, because then it's also up in tempo and is still a tutor, which is big insane, big crazy. And I don't even think that the 4 mana mode. I think the thing that's good with this is that lots of the pressure cards, their normal cost is kind of bad, or you only really want to be playing them for their pressure cost. Here, the base case is actually not that bad, especially given how many toolbox worthy cheap creatures we have in the format at this point. So I think that you're eminently fine paying for paying the base cost if you're still setting up for the pressure cost. And once the pressure cost hits, it's just insane.
Yeah, I think this card's kind of funny because it's kind of trash in the same shells as a lot of the other pressure cards because they're big CMC creatures that get cheaper, and Collect Rotting Remains just can't find them. So even though it's in the same colors as a lot of them, it just adds a different direction you can take the pressure deck. And I think that's just good design. That's just cool design. I'm looking forward to seeing the toolbox decks with Collect Rotting Remains as a 4 of. I think that decks like that are inherently fun. They lead to a lot of interaction points, a lot of decisions for both players. I think they're very healthy for the format. This is a card that I'm very happy that we have.
One thing that I think is also interesting is the Unearth mode on this, but I think cheating 2 mana for 3 mana isn't a huge upside. So, it's neat. It's also a regrowth. But I think one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about with Collect Rotting Remains is it's playing really, really small ball. You're relying on your cheap creatures to get you there, and they have to be creatures. Having played a lot of Ayala's Concord and built a lot of Ayala's Concord, being able to tutor up Planeswalkers is a large part of what makes that card good, let alone playable. So I'm a little bit worried with the way in which you can utilize Collect Rotting Remains not being powerful enough to justify the deck building cost.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see it in a shell with bigger fish.
Yeah, that's true.
the weird line of 5 mana, 2 card, tutor a 6-drop, get whatever your 3 drops ETB was is really janky, but I could see it being powerful.
I mean, I feel like you just want to tutor up a 5-drop, grab Sign of Desolation, pop off,
True.
Okay, so the next one is a legendary creature, Duchess Odelia the 7th. So for 2 mana, green and white, she's a 1/2. Enter the battlefield, search your library for a non-land permanent card with convert mana cost 1 or less, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. So this card does kind of a crazy amount of little things. And again, it's very much a small ball card, but I think if you build your deck right, she can put together a really terrifying toolbox. So one thing to keep in mind is we actually have a 1-drop Planeswalker. So you can tutor up, what's her name?
Edith Want.
Thank you. I never run Edith, but I think about her every other time. You can, I'm pretty sure we have some decent artifacts that you can tutor up. For the next month, you can tutor up Cold Grave afterwards. You can't do that, but we have other
1 mana or less, 8 pieces that you can tutor up.
What about like Stone Coil Serpent type stuff?
Yep.
We don't have a
in
lot of Vista, I think.
in this set, we actually just got one, so we can get to that in a little bit. But you can also like grab, Green X Hydras. You can grab Idyllic Odyssey. You can probably grab other tutors, honestly. I haven't looked into that too heavily, but my general instinct with Duchess Odelia is she can do a lot of different things, and people are probably not leveraging her effectively enough. Earthfeeder Worm is another huge one. So that's you can main deck have tutorable Grave Hate with her.
That's
You can
true.
also run Trapped in the Tower in your sideboard, which is a kind of Oblivion Ring that are Journey to Nowhere that lasts as long as you don't lose any life. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this card's very cool, but I also think that if you're just using her to grab the same card every time, you should not be playing her. I think where this card becomes good is when you have like 3 or 4 different things she grabs, because tutors and toolboxes are more powerful the fewer the more different things they can get, and the more different things you want to get.
Like a 1/2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have Hila Okunos. So this is another green-white card. And it does similar searchy stuff. When it enters the battlefield, you get to look at the top 6 and grab an aura at Aura Shaper. And the big money is that she free copies all of your auras and Aura Shapers, which is like for 3 mana. That is insane value, and I don't think that this would be remotely fair if it wasn't such a niche or like difficult to make work permanent type. But being in like I think auras and aura shapers, they are definitely less powerful generally than their compatriots, so it works out to a powerful build around slash kind of encouraging you to go into that archetype. Though also we discussed earlier how lots of the aura shaper decks kind of want to be more aggressive, and this is a little bit more value-y, but also on God, no one's gonna stop me from slapping down double temp treason. Like you guys, you can try to hold me back, but I'm so gonna go like dork, turn 2 this, turn 3 temp treason 2 of your things.
I also think you can do some stupid things like like playing this and then slapping 2 curses on your opponent, since those are all auras. Like, let me think. What are some good curses to slap onto your opponent? I wouldn't mind. I mean, I wouldn't mind slapping down 2 Explorer's Fates onto someone. I think that probably goes well. Can't imagine double Mark of Dark Opulence goes poorly. Like there's a lot of things that just like, oh yeah, and then it's doubled, and then you're dead.
Double Curse of Uncertainty.
Double Curse of Tracking. I'm pretty hyped about.
Oh yeah, that is nice.
Because okay, cool. I put 2 Curse of Trackings with you. I attack with the Hila, and I draw 2 cards. Again, you need to run a pretty high density for this to reliably draw a card on its ETB. But I think if you do that, if it draws a card on ETB, this card's nuts. If it doesn't, it's just okay. And then you start casting like, I don't know, Ethereal Armors. 2 Ethereal Armors kills people very, very dead very, very quickly.
That's true.
Okay. So next up we have Lord Ricard Dawson, and I think this is definitely one of the cards, I would put it as like top 5 impactful cards in this set. Boy making waves. So it's a Mardu Planeswalker, and there's a lot of text on this boy, so let's run through it real quick. So he's got a little bit of a self-protection static, where creatures have to pay 2 life or discard a card to even get at him in the first place. His +1 makes a treasure token, and then if you want, you can pay 1 to make an opponent discard a card. Obviously, the expectation is if you're playing this on curve, you're probably going to discard you're going to sack the treasure to do that, or you're going to hold up these treasures for ramp going forward. You also want to hold up the treasure for 0, which allows you to sacrifice an artifact to lightning helix something. But yeah, in general, he's just kind of a powerful, flexible, like Liliana of the Veil style threat. We're just like, I'm gonna just incessantly force you to have card disadvantage, and then I can also clean up the board if I need to. And obviously the static making it so that you can't deal with him without further hemorrhaging either life or hand size, which again he can pressure each of those, makes him really deadly to deal with. Of course, having low starting loyalty means that even after a +1s, you can still bolt him. And so there's lots of like little there's ways to counterplay it. But yeah, I don't know. What do you guys have to add?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting toolbox of abilities on this walker. I think he'll really only be great if you're in a deck where you can 0 the turn he comes down. I think you need to guarantee that you have an artifact in play so that you can shoot something if necessary and have the planeswalker stick around, because you just can't rely on +1 pass turn, untap, 0 sacrifice my treasure. I think that there are some really powerful lines that this guy can have, and he will take over the game. If he's given the chance to. But the deck building, I really think that you need to be able to use the 0 right off the bat, or else he's just not strong enough.
Yeah, I think this card is very difficult to cast, and that helps a lot of the worry that I would have about it in check. I think it's a very powerful +1, and the 0 is very good, but it's like, how to phrase this? I don't think the 0 requires some things to be going right. Either you untapped with him, or like you had existing artifacts. Like you can't just slap him in a random Mardu deck and say, "Yeah, this will get there." But with both those things like pointed out, like this card, if you don't answer it very quickly, will just bury you with that +1. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we just add on card good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Card is good.
So I don't even want to try pronouncing that. Orixith? Doom of Elmare?
Orixith, I think is how you... Orixia?
Close enough.
Yeah, Orixith, I think that's how it is.
Is an 8-drop 4/6. You're never casting that. With pressure 6 mana, sacrifice 2 creatures. Realistically, you're not casting that. But when it enters battlefield or attacks, you get an XX black horror creature token, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. And then 2 mana, sacrifice another creature, gain control of target creature with power less than the sacrifice creature's power. So, okay. I think we probably shouldn't have put this on the list, because I think in a world without Chick U Champion, this is a pretty hype reanimation target. But I don't think it gets there anymore. Like, I think the amount of power it's putting on the battlefield and like just constantly generating, and the utility it has, it's just dwarfed by fucking Ash Ketchum and his entire team. But like, oh, you can cast this, yeah, for 6 mana and 2 creatures. That's not something you're going to have on hand in the Reanimator deck. So yeah, I'm kind of off this card.
Yeah, I'm very off of this card. I don't think it's playable in MSEM. I think it's a pretty cool EDH thing.
Yeah, that's
it's a big, cool Timmy creature, and you can never get enough of those. Okay, next up we have Repel Liner. 3/1 menace for 2, which strong stat line. It's also an artifact creature, which we've obviously seen lots of cards which would love artifact creatures for their aggressive synergies. And it can also recur itself by, you can discard a card, and an artifact creature you control salvages Repel Liner. So it can keep coming back, baby. But again, it requires more artifact creatures. So you're going to need a nice density. And you probably play this in the same deck that you would play, what was it called? Oh my god. The 1-red Lightning Strike Tormenting Voice.
Advent from above?
Yeah, Advent from Above, Oil Driller, the... whatchamacallit? the 3 mana one, which mills 3 cards and allows you to
Trench
cast.
Bottom Mariners.
Yeah, Trench Bottom Mariners. Like lots of them just kind of form a deck on their own, and this is just a good piece to just be like, pop pop, black red
See-
artifact deck.
Where I want to play this is Tide Hollow Lich,
Oh yeah, that's kind of filthy.
Yeah.
because those two can kind of pop each other back and forth. I don't know. I think Repel Liner also does something interesting. By interesting, I mean potentially worrisome, which is it gives you a discard outlet in your graveyard if you mill over it or discard it. Thankfully, and only as a sorcery means you can only do that once, and you need to have an artifact creature in play. Like that's something that you can potentially abuse. I think the card reminds me a lot of Scrap Heap Scrounger, except just like slightly less good. Scrap Heap Scrounger was a very good card, so probably fine.
Yeah, Scrap Heap Scrounger was very powerful, so being slightly less good than Scrap Heap Scrounger is not condemning. I think this card, I think it's powerful. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's going to make huge waves, but I won't be surprised when it pops up in decks. It's also a flavorful home run. The ability being the repel line up to the top is so interesting. I think it's a very well designed card, and I want to give it a couple of stats to that.
Though, I will say, it is not as well designed as our next card, because I think this is the perfect Magic card. Like,
What a
you
great
know,
man,
combo.
now I'm
like,
excited.
this
I've
is what
forgotten what's
peak
up
performance
next.
looks like.
Okay, wait. Drum roll. And it's Stinks. Oh my god. Look at that blep. Yeah, this is the
Alright,
superior
Kevin,
3/1
sell us
for
on this
2.
card.
Okay, so first we just need to. You know what? I will laugh about it later. But so when it 3/1 is first strike when it's attacking, which should just be regular for. This is just how first strike should work. Red and white, it's 2 mana. When it dies, you get a fish sword that just basically it's kind of like a reverse bestow, and you get a free equip. This thing just does so much for so little investment, and like you could reanimate it, you can get it back. Like I want to theocracy this thing out for days. It's just it just does it is aggressive, and it just keeps being aggressive.
I think
It
an
makes
important
a
thing.
fish sword.
I think an important thing to remember is also that the fish sword is an enchantment artifact, and you're equipping it to a creature. So good luck, you have Concord now.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I think this card is just kind of it does its thing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have that much to say about it. You know if you want it. You realistically don't. But hey, if you do, hey, enjoy.
I mean,
what's
it's just a powerful, aggressive creature that also has recurring value and synergizes with Concord. I don't think it's that bad.
It reminds me a lot of Zadina Valiant, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I agree, but I was also
Sure.
pretty low on people running Zadina Valiant in the first place.
Wait, how does Kinkin work?
I think it exiles the tokens.
yeah, I
I don't.
I'm pretty sure.
Y-
I want to
Yeah,
say
it
two
exiles
quick
it.
things about Stinging Swordfish. One of them is that the artifact token is named Fish Sword, which is just that's chef's kiss right there. And I just want to comment on just how blue this art is on the red, white, gold frame. It's so blue.
Yeah, you know how they had like
That's all I
Vanta
have to
Black,
say.
which is like the black paint, which is just 100%, like 99.99% of light it absorbs. So this is like the same thing except for blue. It just eliminates all of that red and green channel. Just it obliterates them. Nothing
Flip
but
that blue
blue,
to
baby.
100, baby. Love it.
Next up, we have Turi of Hollow Depths, which you know, like we had nothing but blue on the last one. This
what's
is
this card?
Oh yeah, this is the nothing but
Never seen
bullshit
this card
card.
before.
No, I'm just joking. But Turi is 8 mana for a whopper of a planeswalker. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't cast, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness and draw a card. It's now a May trigger.
Yeah.
And then you return up to one target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield as surplus. You -3 is create an 8/8 Kraken creature token. And finally, the ult that you're seeing on screen was changed. It's now, I believe, is it like a Rise of the Dark Realm style effect, if I remember right?
Yeah, it's each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifice all creatures they control. Then you get all creatures exiled this way. So it's
Living
it's
death,
basically a
living death,
living
except
end,
fuck you. Yeah.
except you get all of the things.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Turi was kind of a menace at this last GP when the ult was as it is, because we had lots of ways to cheat it, or not lots, but we had a decent number of ways to cheat it out early, then -X and create true combos to death. Now I think it's like a little bit more fair as a just big but will fuck your shit up if it ever comes down planeswalker.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very cool design that unfortunately got hamstrung by a stupid combo deck that led to 4 cards being nerfed. That wasn't on Turi, and I think that Turi could have even existed without the change to the -X. But this makes it just less
I
likely
think like
to show
in
up.
general, like
stupid
we
cheat-out.
like stuff like SavCon and other things where it's like one card combo cards, no matter how difficult it is to just get them out in the first place, it's just kind of like just better to kneecap them a little just in case.
Yeah, and whenever there's the possibility for one card combo, it's what people are going to try to do with it. So I think it's a great design. I love this card. And I think it's a lot safer now and still a great cheat out target that does a lot of fun things, but also people are going to try to play with it the way it was meant to be played with.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you're looking for the Timmiest Timmy card to ever Timmy, it's probably still Chiku Champion, but this comes in a close second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the thing that really strikes me about this card is how good it is, even just doing a Palak Worm impression. Is very good at that.
Oh
That's
yeah,
true. That's true.
Yeah.
the fact that it immediately enabled itself is kind of baller.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up we have Under the Sea, which I think is just flavorfully my favorite card in the entire set. No contest. And it also has a really cool ability itself. As long as there are 4 or more card types among permanents you control, you may cast the first spell you cast each turn without paying its mana cost. At 5 mana, it's a little steep, but also getting free casts is nothing to scoff at. I think just being at 5 cost and 3 colors, it's a little bit much to justify and construct it. But just look at it as a whole picture. This is a card that I would definitely, if my child brought it home from kindergarten, I would proudly put a magnet on it and put it up on the fridge. It is just.
Like, the fact that it has to be the first one, just like.
Yeah, not being able to like throw out a cantrip or some sort of like.
Right. I mean, it stops it from doing the thing that Fires of Invention, Wilderness Reclamation do, where they're mana doublers that also double your mana the turn they come down. Because if it wasn't the first spell, then you could do Under the Sea. Here's my 9-drop, and I don't think that's actually a healthy play pattern. One thing we've been seeing though in this GP is, unlike some other effects like this, it says each turn. So we've seen someone playing a deck where they go Under the Sea, pass turn, on your upkeep, Kraken time, end the turn.
Oh.
Wait, someone's actually doing that this GP?
I'm pretty sure that's Dork and Distress's deck this GP.
Okay, wait, how well do they do?
I don't think that well.
Okay.
Double check. But
okay, I was like, damn, if this is because I was just slandering this card earlier, and if it turns out it's actually doing well, but okay, no, you know what?
Jordan Stress went 3-2, so that's entirely respectable.
Oh, that's actually that's a lot better then. Yeah, okay, so maybe this card is the real dealie.
The deck is running 4 Kraken times and no other combo cards. So it's just running like this Vant,
Concord deck with like Elvish Opportunist, Cameo, Voltas, Unravelings, Commands, Sights Beyond, Idyllic Odysseys, and then just like this 1/2 Splinter Twin situation of Under the Sea, Crack and Time You.
Fair, which because like Tameo Sights Beyond, all like set, you have enough card selection that you don't really need more than 4 nut targets.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, like, could how many instances should you run in this sort of deck? Like, should you also have like other expensive instants that you can do to fuck their day up? I don't know.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where at some point you also need to make sure that you're not just glutting your deck with powerful instants, because when you don't hit Under the Sea and Concord, you have to wait until you have 8 mana to cast them.
Yeah, don't do that one. But like, the thing to realize is if Under the Sea is enabling you an extra 4 to 5 mana a turn, that's incredibly worth it. And just playing instants drastically increases the chances of it. So maybe playing someone like the Gaze Beyonds and other like similar big draw spells. But passing to your opponent's turn and being able to tap out for this and safely say, I'm still representing a counterspell. I'm still representing like any of these things. Like, that's pretty big.
That's true.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I think if this card is good, it's mostly because of the fact that you can cast things on your turn. So on your opponent's turn. So it's important to figure out how best to utilize that.
Yep, little Angel of Sucor situation there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next up, we have Cannon Coil Hermit, and this is the Stone Coil Serpent that was referenced earlier. We have a reference to that with the coil in the name. And like Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, it's an XX colorless card which enters with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can pump it up by paying 1 and tapping it. You can also pay 1 and remove a +1/+1 counter to shoot anything for damage equal to its power, though obviously you're nerfing it by removing a counter before the damage is dealt. And you can also pay 3 to untap it. So if you get a bunch of mana, you can kind of just go. I mean, obviously, like with infinite mana, this does just kill your opponent. But
Yeah.
even with like a sizable amount of, if you have like a sizable chunk of mana out of somewhere, cough Heart of Zadina, you can definitely just be like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna one turn, I'm just gonna play Cannon Coil Hermit for a bunch, and then like next turn just untap it a bunch and just kill you. Cool, we good with that?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
y'all got stuff to say?
Not really. This just does the thing. Like, some decks will want the XX00 that gets a +1/+1 counter for each X, right? There are decks that want to play that card, and this does that thing. I don't think it's a very exciting version of that thing, especially because it takes so much mana to use its other abilities, but it's still the thing, so some decks will play it.
And notably, like unlike Walking Ballista, you do need to make sure this sticks around for a turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get to just threaten to shoot them for like 6 if they try to remove it. Okay. Next up, we have Dawson's Loot. And we've kind of been going on bombs right now, but this one's just a solid common enabler. It replaces itself by drawing a card as an ETB, also mills 2, which as we've seen, because of pressure and everything, is good. It's also an artifact for Concord, and you can sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color, also putting another card in your graveyard, but also just kind of filtering. I feel like you can't really go wrong with Dawson's Loot, but I don't know, you also need you need to justify why you're slotting in stuff for it, because it can be kind of low impact compared to other things that you could be playing. So you really want to make use of the full package and not just like 1 or 2 parts of it, because if you want milling, we have more efficient things for that. If you want a cantripping artifact, we likely have more efficient things for that. If you just want something that fixes, there's also more efficient things that do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of my big issues with this card is we literally have the globe legal in the format. So you need to convince me that I would rather be milling 2 than permanently having the fixing. Because you're choosing one time one-time fixing
Yeah,
over
my
permanent
my
fixing.
argument
and the only
is fuck blue, blue lame. Who plays that color anyways?
Bad take. Bad take. But yeah, like this card's fine. It's already like I think it's seen played this GP. If not this GP, people have been playing it in some other formats.
Yeah, I've definitely run across it in leagues.
Yeah, Kino for one with it actually. In the Tesmodo deck. So maybe that's where you want to be. But I think that deck's about to vanish very, very quickly. And I think it's only good in those very specific circumstances. So I'm not super high.
Yeah, I think that this does some interesting things in decks that both want to play Tamiyo and want to fill their graveyard. And those decks are going to exist, but they're going to be few and far between. I think that it's mostly worse than other things in this slot, no matter what it is you're trying to do with it. So, like Caillou said, you need to have you need to care about the whole package. And there will be decks that do that. I think it's playable. I just don't think it's, exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, but it does what it does.
Yeah.
Okay, and next up is Lost Empire's Legacy. It's 4 mana, but it does rebuy some of its cost by making 2 treasure tokens on ETB, and it also gives you an alternative use for those by allowing you to pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact to return another artifact from your graveyard to your hand. So
this card just gives me the best possible trading post vibes possible.
Yeah, it's grindy and value-y if you can set it up.
Yeah, like especially if you start rebuying another Lost Empire's Legacy, like you can just net treasures and board presses that way, or just like you sacrifice a globe to recur. I don't know, something bigger and scarier. Like I think this card is really cool. I think it's slow and dirtily, so you need to do some cool things to enable it, but also like Ostracizer Orb exists, so you can have artifact-based removal spells as well as artifact-based draw engines. Like you can probably put together a decent prison with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a card that I see and I think this is powerful. I'm never ever going to build the deck in which it's powerful, but it definitely exists. It requires a specific kind of person and a specific kind of deck builder, the just nobody type, to really exploit the most powerful lines with this.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's talk about another card that was involved in the Leyland alignment field that may or may not win this GP. Metalia, Light from Above, is a 4 mana 4/3 that's all colors. When she enters battlefield for each color, you may salvage a non-legendary card of that color, and she has pro colors from cards she has salvaged. So one thing that I was talking about is I think this card might just be good enough in like a fair mid-range deck. Like if she comes down, she grabs like a Pithwilt, a Mana Dork, and an RFE, or something like that. She now has pro every color but red, and will draw you 3 cards over the course of the next couple turns. Like those are not a wide range of cards or colors. So she's a pretty powerful 4-drop, just like in entirely fair use case.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, this is the card that when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is the card which I had the wow, this is fucked up reaction to the most out of any card in this set. It's just like, it's really flexible. It draws you a bunch of cards while also being an evasive threat. But I do like the play pattern of, as you like salvage cards back, she becomes weaker and weaker. So you have to like, sometimes that can be like a consideration where it's like, oh man, they have this green blocker that could kill me. So even though I want my Pithwalt back, I shouldn't actually grab it because that'll remove my pro green. So I should grab something else first. Stuff like that. Still, I feel like in practice, it's probably just very, very strong. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
Alright, Reef Crown Egg. This is a card that's like, it's so weird to evaluate. So it has Cycling 2, so again, important base case to remember here. When you draw your second card each turn, put a hatch counter on it. and tap, sack it. You draw a card, then you can cheat out a card with with CMC less than or equal to the number of hatch counters on it. So I think people are going to compare it to Aether Vial, and I think that's wrong. I think this card is just like, you want to play it early like Aether Vial, but you need to enable it. You can't just wait. And you can only crack it once, but when you crack it, it replaces itself. So it kind of like generates mana at no card cost, but it generates mana in a weird way because it's only generating mana like once a turn, and also you need to be doing something special to enable it.
It just
I don't
feels
know.
kind of
Also, slapping
clunky.
cycling onto it, cycling on the Aether Vial effect is kind of nice because if you draw in the late game, like you super don't want to play this out. But
Yeah, but
although
overall,
wait, no, why the fuck does it have cycling?
I was gonna say my biggest problem with this card's design is that it already has cycling 1. So
Yeah,
why do it have
that
cycling
just
2?
clicked. I guess to enable itself in other copies.
No, it already
it's
does
also
that.
specifically
It's not
because
legendary,
for stuff that
so-
specifically cares about discarding, because like
Yeah,
we
no,
saw
but you want to cycle
anime.
on their turn egg. What about that? But no, I agree with you. Like that's kind of whack.
I think it's like for specific like stuff that specifically talks about cycling, stuff that like Anamorphous where like both discarding and drawing suddenly means a lot rather than technically cycling it but not really, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm with egg. Like that just additive distraction just fucked me up there. Like I would have misplayed this card if I had it.
Yeah, I think for the actual play patterns of this card, I think it's an interesting card to just like have in your back pocket. It's almost never possible to be dead because you can just sacrifice it to draw a card at any point, and that's not good, but it's fine. Like a card is fine, and it's impossible to target this with removal because if this has 3 counters on it and your opponent's like, all right, I'll Pith Wilt your Reef Ground Egg, you're just like, cool, I'll sacrifice it to put my 3-drop in play. That's just a miserable line for your opponent. So this just gets to sit and play until you use it, which is a nice base case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and our last card for the review is Rust Shell Crustacean. It's 3 mana for a 0/0, but it gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, so it comes in as a 1/1. And whenever it attacks, you get to tutor for an equipment card or make a treasure token. So I think at 3 mana this is a little slow / clunky unless you can make this come down as sufficiently big that you can attack with it and like not get immediately blown out. But even then it's a little clunky. I think this was originally 2 mana, which explains a little bit more, but yeah.
Yes, this was originally 2 mana, and then Pip and I yelled at Dodger until he changed it.
Yeah. Can confirm. It's like also like so your options are either okay, cool. Whenever this attacks, I either A, draw a card and it's a good card, or B, I generate mana and grow my creature. Like I don't think there's a world in which this is an appropriate 2-drop. I think it's probably going to be underexplored for the next little bit because people have a weird like aversion to cards that have been nerfed. But I think the combination of this and Setosan makes for such a reliable equipment deck, and we have so many genuinely powerful equipment that people should be exploring that. This carries equipment like a beast.
True.
Well, I mean, yeah, have you ever seen a crab? You give them anything and they'll just hold it.
Yeah, they just grab knives and they just stab.
Mm-hmm. They're also
It's also
surprisingly
just
good at dancing.
It's not that hard to, play an artifact creature turn 1, 2 artifact tokens on turn 2, and then play 3 mana 4/4 with value on turn 3. Like, that line's not difficult to do. So the crustacean, I think, can reliably be a lot bigger than it looks, which is another reason that I think it's going to be underexplored, because it looks like a 3 mana 1/1. It's just, I think, in a deck that plays it properly, will never be that.
Yeah. I agree. Like, it's also not that difficult to be, like, even just if it comes down as a 3 mana 3/3 with those effects, you're like, whoa, hold on, that's good. And that's just like, have a clue in play, have a equipment in play, have anything in play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a Brine Fleet Bay.
Oh god. think with that, that's the end of our review of Elmare Into the Abyss. If you made it this far, thank you all for watching.
So there were actually 2 lands, Caillou. I'm
There are
sorry.
2 lands?
Oh yeah, the pressure lands.
Well, okay, I did
So-
not add those images to this, so let's just talk about
Alright.
them.
I can just read them out, basically. So we have a cycle of lands, which are, you can play them from your graveyard if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, so they effectively have pressure. They're ETB tap duels, and they have cycling one MN, so 1 and then each mana of their color. I think these are worse than the existing cycling lands, but the card advantage they provide is kind of silly, like especially if you're milling over them. So I don't know. It's possible that like Black Green Villainy should be running the Black Green one as a one of, but I'm not certain. And if y'all don't have any opinions there, I'm happy to also talk about the other land.
Yeah, I mean, they are what they are. They're
something
duels.
Secret of New Horizons in these.
I feel like they're not that good in that deck because you just cannot afford that many tap lands.
True.
Okay, so let's talk about Enchanting Palace, which is the other land. So we have these pressure lands, now we have a Concord land, which is tap, add C. Tap, if you have Concord, you get a treasure token. This was currently run in the blue-white Concord deck, this GP, and it was pretty bad there. I think in general, this card's just interesting because creating a treasure token once you already have Concord is not super valuable. And in general, you can't run too many colorless lands in Concord decks because they tend to be very heavy on color requirements. But, you know, getting a treasure every turn is a powerful effect, so it's probably better than it looks at first glance. I'm just not super into where it is.
Yeah, I think it's either better or worse than it looks at first glance, depending on if you're excited about a colorless land or not. I think every time I look at a colorless land, I'm just like, okay, sell me on it. Otherwise, I'm not putting it in my deck. Some people see colorless lands and think, all right, I'm going to put 14 of these in my deck and just take them out until I have a deck that works. But I think this is somewhere in the middle of those.
Yeah, that's so real. All right.
The only time that I've watched it be played was in a deck that was also playing Setosan, and I watched them misplay it like 3 turns in a row because Setosan is not a planeswalker on your turn, so you don't have Concord.
Yep.
Oof.
Gaming. But yeah, okay. Actually, for realsies now, if you've listened this long, thank you for watching the entire Elmare review. And I hope that you'll look through the entire set file, which we linked in the description, because even though we talked about a lot of cards here, the set is filled with many more that are juicy and exciting in MSEM, and also for its limited format, I believe that while we aren't currently running drafts of it, we probably will be in the future, so keep an eye on that. But yeah, until next time, when we will be reviewing Dark Seas of Shurien.
For making this set.
Oh yeah, thank you to Dodger for making the set. We miss you very much. Please come back from the war. Egg has moved in and he won't stop talking.
I only benefit from Dodger's death.
So true. All right. Well, from the perspective of everyone watching this, there's a good chance that there will be a Dark Seas episode shortly where Egg will be mysteriously replaced by Dodger. And I'm sure we're all excited for that, including Egg.
Cannot wait.
Yeah, until then, this is Caillou, Pipsqueak, Kevin, and Egg signing off.